The Council Capitol Station did not look like a government building. It looked like a prayer made of money. It was a cathedral of glass-black alloy that hung suspended in the hard vacuum of the core sector, rotating with a slowness that suggested it had all the time in the universe and absolutely no patience for anyone who wasted it. Floating banners of holoscript, 300 feet tall, drifted around the station's spires like lazy ghosts, proclaiming the virtues of the Galactic Concordat in 12,000 languages. The air inside the upper levels smelled of ozone and expensive perfume, and the main rotunda possessed an acoustic quality that sounded like silence made expensive. It was a place where a footstep echoed like a gunshot and a whisper could end a solar system. Jace Rourke hated it. He was currently 300 levels below the expensive silence, wedged waist-deep into a service conduit that smelled entirely of recycled atmosphere and old grease. Jace was a station maintenance technician, a title that sounded professional but mostly meant he was the guy they called when the toilets backed up in the diplomatic wing or when a gravity plate started hiccuping in the cargo sector. He was 30 years old, possessed a face that rested naturally in an expression of skepticism, and survived on a diet of synthetic caffeine and a healthy, well-cultivated fear of authority. He adjusted his magnetic grip on the conduit wall and tapped his headset. "Unit, give me a diagnostic on this seal," Jace muttered. "And do not tell me it is fine. If it were fine, I would be in the mess hall eating something that is almost definitely not chicken." A small repair drone hovered near his left ear. It was a spherical little machine, battered and covered in stickers from various planetary transit authorities. Jace had programmed its personality interface himself during a long, bored shift 3 years ago, a decision he regretted daily. "The seal is operating at 40% efficiency." The drone chirped. Its voice sounded like a polite butler inhaling helium. "Also, your heart rate suggests you are irritated. Have you considered deep breathing exercises? The manual suggests." "I have considered turning you into a toaster," Jace said. "Hand me the hydro spanner." He wiped a smear of oil from his cheek. "Down here." The station was not a cathedral. It was a machine. It clanked and hissed and groaned. Up above, the council projected their glossy propaganda about peace among species and the benevolent unity of the stars. Down here, the walls were covered in scrawled graffiti warning about sector gangs, and the ventilation shafts carried whispered rumors that never made the evening news. Rumors about dissidents who vanished during routine customs checks. Rumors about a tribunal wing in the northern spire that did not appear on any official schematic. Jace tried not to listen to the rumors. He was an off-the-books translator for odd alien dialects, a side hustle that paid for better parts for his drone and worse whiskey for himself. He knew enough to know that paying attention got you noticed, and getting noticed got you erased. He was just tightening the final bolt on the conduit when the station groaned. It was not the usual thermal expansion groan. It was a deep, resonant thrum that vibrated through Jace's teeth. The lights in the service tunnel flickered and died, replaced instantly by the harsh, rotating crimson of emergency strobes. "Unit." "What is that?" Jace asked, pulling himself out of the conduit. "Station-wide energy surge," the drone replied. "Rerouting protocols active. Blast shutters are descending in Sector 4 through 9. "Sector 4? Jace frowned. "That was the main cargo arterial. That is the prisoner transport route. Why would they lock down the main line?" Before the drone could answer, the blast door at the far end of the corridor slammed shut with a sound like a guillotine. Then the door behind him did the same. Jace was trapped in a 50-foot stretch of maintenance hallway, the air suddenly thick with the whine of overtaxed power relays. "Great," Jace said. "Just great. Open the auxiliary bypass. I cannot, the drone said. Security override, priority alpha. Jace froze. Priority alpha meant a council member was dead or a war had started. Or, more likely, someone very important was moving something very illegal. A heavy grinding noise echoed from the ceiling. The service access hatch, a massive square of reinforced steel designed to let heavy machinery drop into the tunnels, began to grind open. Jace scrambled back into the shadow of a support pillar. What is coming down here? Jace hissed. Manifest lists it as biological waste disposal, the drone said. That is a lie, Jace said. The hatch opened fully, and a transport pod descended on anti-gravity repulsors. It was not a garbage scow. It was a military-grade containment unit, sleek and black, flanked by 4 armed guards in unmarked gray armor. They were not council security. They moved too efficiently, their rifles raised and scanning the shadows. The pod touched down on the grating with a heavy clang. The lead guard gestured, and the squad fanned out. Secure the perimeter, the leader said. His voice was distorted by a scrambler helmet. We hold here until the upper corridor cycles. If anything moves, kill it. Jace pressed himself flatter against the cold metal of the pillar. This was bad. This was beyond bad. This was the kind of situation where you saw things you were not supposed to see, and then you stopped existing. The transport pod hissed. The side panel slid open, revealing a thick, fractured stasis prism. Jace looked. He should have looked away, but he looked. Inside the prism was a woman. She was humanoid, tall and terrifyingly still. Her skin was a pale, luminous violet that seemed to catch the red emergency lights and drink them in. She was battered, a dark bruise blooming across her cheekbone like a storm cloud, and her clothes were shreds of ceremonial silk and scorched armor. But it was her eyes that pinned Jace to the wall. They were open, wide and aware, irisless pools that looked like refracted starlight caught in deep water. She was bound in a restraint collar of heavy iron that pulsed with a jagged, sickly yellow light. It was old tech, brutal and messy, flickering with illegal code that Jace recognized from the black market coding forums. It was a neural damper designed to override higher brain functions. She is not biological waste, Jace thought. She is a prisoner. One of the guards tapped the side of the prism with the butt of his rifle. She is waking up again, the guard said. The sedative is wearing off. Increase the voltage, the leader snapped. We are at maximum, the guard replied. This tech is unstable. If we push it higher, the feedback will liquefy her brain. The leader shrugged. Do it. The order is for containment. If she arrives as a vegetable, the paperwork is easier. It is practically an execution anyway. Jace felt a cold knot form in his stomach. This was not a transport. This was a slow-motion murder. The woman in the prism shifted, her gaze tracking through the fractured glass, locked onto the shadows where Jace was hiding. He stopped breathing. She could see him. He knew she could see him. She did not look at the guards. She looked directly at the dirty, terrified maintenance tech shivering behind a pillar. Her lips moved. She made no sound. The glass was too thick, but she mouthed a single word. Jace's translator implant, usually calibrated for trade disputes and technical manuals, shrieked in his skull. It glitched, static tearing through his auditory center, before resolving the lip movement into a single thundering concept. Choose. It was not a plea. It was not a beg. It was a command. The guard reached for the dial on the restraint collar. Jace looked at the guard's hand. He looked at the woman's eyes. He thought about his apartment, his collection of vintage music chips, and his very strong desire to live to be 31. Then his drone, sensing the spike in his blood pressure, decided to be helpful. Warning: the drone projected, its holographic emitter flaring to life in the dim tunnel. Safety protocols indicate unauthorized stress levels. Would you like to review the chapter on workplace ergonomics? A 10-foot-tall hologram of a cartoon stick figure lifting a box with proper knee alignment appeared in the center of the hallway, directly between Jace and the guards. The guards spun around, rifles snapping up. "Contact!" the leader screamed. "Fire!" Plasma bolts shredded the holographic stick figure. The distraction lasted exactly 3 seconds. It was enough. Jace did not think. If he had thought, he would have stayed hidden. Instead, he moved on pure, reckless instinct. He sprinted from the cover of the pillar, sliding across the oily floor grating. He was not a soldier, but he was a tech, and he knew machines. He knew that the restraint collar was running a localized loop, and if he could interrupt the power flow, the failsafe would trigger an unlock to prevent an explosion. He slammed into the side of the prism. The guard was turning, raising his rifle. "Don't move!" the guard roared. Jace jammed his hydro spanner into the exposed port of the restraint collar. "I am just stopping the shock feedback," Jace yelled, which was technically true, in the same way that lighting a match is technically thermal regulation. He twisted the spanner. He spliced the bypass. The collar did not just unlock. It screamed. A pulse of energy, white and hot and tasting of ozone, erupted from the woman. It was not electrical. It was something else, alien bio-quantum resonance. It hit Jace like a physical blow, a wave of heat that passed through his ribs and rattled his teeth. He staggered back, gasping, his vision swimming with spots of purple light. The collar fell away, clattering to the floor. The woman inhaled. It was a terrifying sound, a gasp that sucked the air out of the room. She did not slump. She straightened, her eyes flaring with a brilliance that blinded the nearest guard. The alarm shifted from a low wail to a high-pitched scream. "Containment breach!" the leader shouted. "Kill her! Kill them both!" Jace scrambled for traction. He looked at the woman. She was swaying, the drug still fighting her system, but the power radiating off her was making the hair on his arm stand up. "Run!" Jace yelled. He grabbed her hand. He expected it to be cold. It was burning hot. Her gloves were torn, and where his skin brushed hers, a shock of static electricity arc, blue and sharp, snapped between them. Her fingers clamped around his with crushing strength. She did not run. She stumbled. Jace yanked her, hard, pulling her away from the guards and toward the open service hatch of the ventilation artery. This way. Plasma fire chewed up the floor plates behind them. Jace threw himself into the dark opening of the service artery, dragging the woman with him. They tumbled down a chute lined with fiber optic cables, landing in a heap on a maintenance walkway 3 levels down. Jace groaned, rolling onto his back. "Are you shot? Unit, am I shot? No projectile wounds detected." The drone chirped, floating down after them. "However, your adrenaline levels suggest you are about to have a panic attack." "Shut up," Jace wheezed. He looked at the woman. She was kneeling on the grating, one hand pressed to her chest, breathing in ragged, hitching gasps. The resonance pulse was fading, but the air around her still shimmered like heat haze. "We have to move," Jace said, scrambling up. "They have thermal trackers. They will be here in 2 minutes." The woman looked up. Her eyes were unfocused, wild. She tried to stand and failed, her legs buckling. Jace cursed softly. He moved to her side, grabbing her arm. "Up! Come on. I am not carrying you." She flinched when he touched her, a sharp, violent recoil. Then she looked at his face, really looked at him, and the violence drained out of her posture, replaced by a desperate, focused clarity. She nodded. Jace hauled her up. She was heavy, dense with muscle and something else, something solid and unyielding. He hooked her arm over his shoulder, taking her weight. "Service tunnels," he muttered. "We take the gravity shafts to the lower exchange. They will not expect us to go deeper." They ran. It was a nightmare of a chase, The service arteries of the council station were a labyrinth of rotating gravity shafts and drifting tool crates. Jace navigated by memory and desperation. They leaped across a chasm where the gravity shifted 90 degrees. Landing on a wall that became a floor, the woman, Saralith, though he did not know her name yet, moved with a fluid, lethal grace even through her injuries, but she was fading. Every few hundred feet she would stumble, and Jace would have to haul her upright, cursing a steady stream of creative obscenities. "Keep moving," he gritted out. "Do not die on me. I do not get paid overtime for this." They reached a maintenance tram, a rusted metal bucket that ran along a magnetic rail through the center of the station's spine. Jace pried the doors open and shoved her inside. "Unit, override the destination. Level 800. The drone plugged into the console. The tram lurched forward, picking up speed. Jace collapsed on the bench opposite the woman. He was covered in grease and sweat. She sat perfectly straight, despite the blood seeping from a cut on her forehead. She stared at him. The intensity of her gaze made Jace want to hide under the seat. The tram's automated voice spoke, smooth and synthetic. "Warning. Unauthorized passenger density. Please maintain standard social distance." Jace laughed. A breathless, hysterical sound. The drone beeped. Translation correction. The tram sensor indicates biological proximity exceeds recommended parameters for platonic colleagues. Warning. Unauthorized intimacy detected. Initiate ejection protocol? "Do not eject us," Jace shouted at the drone. "It is a joke. It is just close quarters." The woman tilted her head. She looked at the drone, then at Jace. Her expression was unreadable, ancient and bewildered. The tram slowed. Jace peered out the dirty window. "We are here. Heat exchangers." He helped her out. The heat exchanger vault was a cavernous space filled with massive humming coils that scrubbed the station's air and regulated the reactor temperature. It was hot, humid, and loud. Condensation dripped from the ceiling like rain, creating a thick, misty fog that obscured the walls. It was a good place to hide. Thermal scanners were useless here. They collapsed behind a bank of rusted filtration units. Jace slid down the wall, his lungs burning. The woman slumped next to him, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her armor. They sat in the dark, surrounded by the rhythmic thrumming of the machines and the drip, drip, drip of condensation. Jace wiped water from his eyes. He looked at her. "Who are you?" he asked. "And do not tell me you are a diplomat. Diplomats do not have illegal neural collars." She turned her head. Her eyes were silver in the gloom. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words that came out were a garbled mess of clicks and harmonics. Jace tapped his ear. "My implant is fried. Speak standard." "Can you speak standard?" She swallowed, visibly forcing her vocal cords to align. "I am Saralith." Her voice was low, resonant, vibrating in Jace's chest. "Okay, Saralith," Jace said. "Why does a kill squad want you dead in a garbage chute?" She leaned her head back against the metal pipes. "Not dead. Erased." The distinction did not make Jace feel better. "Who were they?" he asked. She closed her eyes. Silence. The ones who keep the silence. Jace's drone hovered closer, scanning her. "Subject is suffering from neurosynaptic degradation," the drone announced. "Also, Her pheromone signature is highly complex. It is confusing my olfactory sensors. She smells like ozone and diplomatic immunity? Saralith's eyes snapped open. She looked at the drone. It talks too much. It gets that from me. Jace said, "Look, we cannot stay here. If they scan the grid, they will find the power spike from the bypass. We need to get you to a docking bay." "No," she said. "Sharp, immediate, no docking bay." They watched the exits. "Then where?" Jace asked. She looked at him. The intensity was back. That searching, weighing look she had given him in the tunnel. She reached out and touched his arm. Her fingers were trembling. "Not out," she whispered. "Up, up." Jace stared at her. "Up is where the council is. Up is where the people who put you in that collar are." "Yes," she said. "That is suicide," Jace said. "That is justice," she said. She tried to stand, but her knees gave way. Jace caught her. For a moment, they were tangled together, his hands on her waist, her hands gripping his shoulders. The damp air of the vault pressed in around them. Jace could see the intricate alien texture of her skin, the way the violet pigment shifted like oil on water. His translator implant sparked again. Analysis. Threat detected. Correction. Flirtation detected. Correction. Threatening flirtation? Saralith looked at Jace, and for the first time, a small, shocked sound escaped her. It was a laugh. It was rusty and surprised, but it was human. "Your machine is confused," she said. "My machine is an idiot," Jace said, gently setting her back down. "But it is right. You are in no shape to climb." A heavy clang echoed from the main door of the vault. Jace froze. He motioned for silence. Footsteps. Heavy, magnetic boots. Not the rhythmic march of the guards from before. These were faster. Quieter. Jace peeked around the filtration unit. 3 figures had entered the vault. They were not wearing the gray armor of the containment squad. They were wearing sleek, matte black suits with no insignia. Their faces were covered by smooth, featureless masks. They moved like oil, flowing through the shadows. Assassins, Jace breathed. Real assassins. The kind the council sent when they did not want paperwork. Jace pulled back. "They found us," he whispered. "And they are not official security, Onlunlu. Those are wet work operatives." Saralith's face hardened. The fear was still there, buried deep, but over it was a layer of cold, diamond-hard rage. "They are cleaning up," she said. "They cannot let me speak." "What do you know?" Jace asked. "What is so dangerous that they sent a ghost team?" Saralith looked at her hands. She turned her wrist over. There, faint against the violet skin, was a scar. It looked like a barcode that had been burned away. "They used my blood," she said softly, "to key the lock. And when it did not work the way they wanted, they tried to break the key." Jace stared at the scar. He did not understand the politics, but he understood the cruelty. He understood being a tool that was discarded when it broke. "Okay," he said. "Okay. We are going up." "How?" she asked. Jace looked around. His eyes landed on a service hatch marked Laundry Drone Dispatch. "We are going to steal some clothes," he said. 10 minutes later, they were in a cargo elevator moving toward the mid-levels. Saralith was wearing a stolen maintenance cloak that was 3 sizes too big, a stolen ID badge that identified her as a Level 2 sanitation engineer, and a hat. The hat was a tragedy. It was a wide-brimmed, floppy thing made of synthetic felt, likely belonging to an eclectic cargo pilot who had left it in the laundry. It was bright orange. Saralith wore it with the offended dignity of a queen forced to wear a bucket. "It hides your face," Jace said, trying not to grin. It insults my ancestors, Sarilith replied, adjusting the brim. They stood in silence as the elevator hummed upward. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a raw, aching exhaustion. The space in the elevator was small. Jace stood near the control panel. Sarilith stood in the corner, but the air between them felt charged. Every time the elevator shuddered, Jace felt a phantom sensation on his skin, a buzzing echo of her presence. The drone drifted between them. Atmospheric tension detected. The drone whispered, suggestion, polite conversation about the weather. Sarilith stepped forward. She moved into Jace's personal space. She did not look at the drone. She looked at Jace. She reached out. She did not touch his skin. She touched 2 fingers to the center of his chest plate, right over his heart. She held them there. She looked up at him, her eyes searching his face, asking a question without words. Jace stopped breathing. He could have stepped back. He could have made a joke. He did not. He stayed still. He let her anchor herself. Sarilith leaned closer. She closed her eyes and inhaled, matching the rhythm of her breath to his. In. Out. In. Out. Jace felt it then, the resonance bond. It was not just heat anymore, and it was a feeling. He felt a wave of terror that was not his own, a crushing weight of claustrophobia from being trapped in the prism. And beneath that, he felt a fierce burning pride, a refusal to break. It flowed through him, steadying her. She was using him as a grounding rod. She was borrowing his calm to hold herself together. Jace exhaled slowly. He let his own fear, his fear of the guards, of the council, of losing his job, drift away. He focused on standing solid. Sarilith opened her eyes. The violet light in them was steady now. "Thank you," she whispered. "You are welcome," Jace said. His voice sounded rough. She stepped back, just an inch, breaking the physical contact but not the connection. "We are almost there," Jace said, turning back to the panel to hide the fact that his hands were shaking. The elevator chimed. Level 50, the restricted core. The doors slid open. They were in a service corridor that ran parallel to the high-security diplomatic wing. The walls here were white marble, not metal. Jace checked the schematic on his wrist. This way. They moved quickly, dodging a patrol drone by ducking into an alcove. Finally, they reached the end of the hall. There was a massive circular hatch. It was sealed with biometric locks and psychic dampeners. The sign above it read, Council Seat Core, authorized bloodline only. Jace looked at the sign. He looked at Sarilith. "Is this it?" he asked. Sarilith stared at the door. She reached up and took off the ridiculous orange hat, letting it drop to the floor. She stood tall, the bruised refugee vanishing, replaced by something terrifying and regal. She ran her hand over the cold metal of the door. "Yes," she whispered. She looked at Jace. "This is what they stole from me." The heavy circular hatch of the council seat core did not look like a door. It looked like a biological valve crafted from starship alloy, a series of interlocking iris petals sealed tight against the world. Jace Rourke stood before it, his hands sweating inside his gloves. He looked at the maintenance panel he had pried open, then at the complex biometric scanner that was currently blinking a hostile red. "This is a blood lock," Jace said, his voice echoing in the white marble corridor. "I can bypass the electrical current, but I cannot fake the genetic key. If I try to hotwire this, the station AI will vent the atmosphere in this hallway. We will not be arrested. We will be freeze-dried." Sarilith stepped forward. She had discarded the ridiculous orange hat, and her violet hair fell in matted, chaotic waves around her face. She looked exhausted, bruised, and hunted, but as she stared at the door, her posture shifted. She stood straighter. The tremor in her hands ceased. Do not hotwire it, she said. Just open the circuit. Jace hesitated, then nodded. He jammed his hydro spanner into the panel, twisting the logic gate until the locking mechanism hummed. Circuit open, Jace said. It is waiting for input. Sarilith raised her hand. She did not hesitate. She pressed her palm flat against the cold, dark sensor plate. For a second, nothing happened. Jace braced himself for the sirens, for the hiss of air venting, for the end. Then, the door groaned. It was a low, organic sound, like a whale song vibrating through metal. The red light on the scanner flickered, died, and was replaced by a pulse of brilliant, blinding white. The alloy petals of the door shivered and began to retract, peeling back one by one, blooming open like a flower recognizing the sun. Identity confirmed. The door's voice spoke, not synthetic like the other drones, but warm, recorded from a voice that had been dead for centuries. Welcome home. Sarilith let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for years. She stepped through the opening. Jace followed her, and immediately wished he had not. The council seat core was not a room. It was a cathedral of madness. The chamber was spherical, suspended in a magnetic field that isolated it from the station's rotation. Inside, gravity felt soft, suggestion rather than law. Floating monoliths of obsidian drifted through the air, orbiting a central platform. These stones were etched with light runes that pulsed in time with a low, thrumming heartbeat that seemed to come from the walls themselves. In the center of the platform sat the seat. It was not a chair. It was an interface grown from biometal. A throne of silver roots and optical fibers that looked like it was waiting to fuse with whoever sat in it. It pulsed with a soft, bioluminescent blue light, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the silent air. Jace stayed near the door, his instincts screaming at him to run. This place is wrong, Jace whispered. It feels alive. It is, Sarilith said. She walked toward the interface. She moved slowly, her boots making no sound on the glass floor. She was trembling again. Jace saw it. It was not just fear. It was the terrified anticipation of someone returning to the scene of a crime, or perhaps a place of worship that had betrayed them. Jace forced a grin, though his stomach was doing somersaults. Hey, he called out, his voice cracking slightly. Do not touch any red buttons, and if that chair tries to eat you, I am strictly observing. I do not fight furniture. Sarilith did not laugh this time. She stopped a foot away from the biometal throne. She reached out, her hand hovering over the armrest where a needle-fine interface array waited. They told me this was dead, she whispered. They told me my blood was a curse. She looked back at Jace. For a moment, she looked entirely human, young, scared, and looking for someone to tell her it was okay to stop. Jace stepped forward. He did not know what this machine was, but he knew what she was. She was the woman who had pulled him out of the line of fire. She was the woman who had held his breath in a laundry elevator. Do it, Jace said softly. Prove them wrong. Sarilith turned back. She placed her palm on the interface. The reaction was instantaneous. The biometal tendrils lashed out, wrapping around her wrist, not attacking, but connecting. The blue light in the room flared into a blinding gold. The floating monoliths slammed to a halt in midair, aligning in a perfect circle. The floor beneath Jace's feet shuddered, 200 levels above them, in the main council chamber. The lights flickered, the massive holographic banners on the station exterior rippled. It was as if the entire station had just inhaled. Then came the twist. Above them, in the opulent silence of the council session, the current High Counselor, a pompous bureaucrat named Varel, was mid-speech. Suddenly, the podium in front of him went dark. The holographic seal of authority floating above his head turned a violent, rejecting red. The station's automated system seized control of the broadcast, cutting his microphone. Down in the core, a projection flared to life in the air above Sarilith. It showed the council chamber in chaos. Officials were scrambling. Varel was shouting soundlessly at his dead microphone, his face drained of color. Rejection protocol initiated. The room's voice announced, "Usurper detected. Emergency dissolution of council authority in progress." Jace stared at the projection. Did you just fire the government?" Jace asked. Sarilith pulled her hand back. The interface released her, but the golden light remained, clinging to her skin. She looked at her hand, stunned. "I just woke the judge," she said. The room turned red. "Security alert," the voice said. "Its warmth gone. Core breach detected. Containment teams dispatched. Estimated arrival, 2 minutes. Jace grabbed Sarilith's arm. "We have to go. Now. You kicked the anthill, and the ants are coming with plasma rifles." Sarilith nodded, the shock fading into grim determination. "We cannot stay here," she said. "I need to be in the chamber. The seat is awake, but it cannot rule from the basement. I have to physically claim the dais." "That is 200 floors up," Jace said. "The elevators will be locked. Then we fly," Sarilith said. They sprinted back through the blooming door, down the marble corridor, and burst into a private diplomatic hangar Jace had spotted on the schematic. Inside sat a sleek, silver diplomatic shuttle, luxurious, fast, and completely unarmed. Jace vaulted into the pilot's seat, Sarilith strapped into the co-pilot chair. "Do you know how to fly this?" she asked as the canopy sealed. "I am a maintenance tech," Jace said, tapping the ignition sequence with frantic speed. "I park these things. Driving them is just parking. Faster." He slammed the throttle forward. The shuttle shot out of the hangar bay like a cork from a bottle, blasting into the open vacuum of the station's civic ring. The civic ring was a chaotic swirl of traffic lanes, floating advertisements, and connecting tubes. Jace banked the shuttle hard to the left, diving between 2 massive cargo haulers. Behind them, 3 council defense drones peeled off from the station hull, their targeting lasers locking onto the shuttle's exhaust. "Hold on!" Jace yelled. He yanked the stick back. The shuttle spiraled upward, threading the needle between a rotating residential habitat and a billboard the size of a mountain. The billboard was playing a loop of Councillor Varrick's smiling face, overlaid with the text, "Order is safety." Jace blasted a hole through the hologram of Varrick's nose. The defense drones opened fire. Green bolts of energy sizzled past the cockpit canopy. "They are shooting at a diplomatic vessel," Sarilith shouted. "That is a violation of the compact." "They are trying to kill the woman who just turned off their paycheck," Jace shouted back. He rolled the shuttle inverted, skimming the surface of the station's atmospheric shield. The G-force pressed them into their seats. Mid-flight, the drone in Jace's pocket woke up. Traffic violation detected. It chirped. "You are speeding in a school zone. Mute!" Jace screamed. He leveled the shuttle out, weaving through the dense traffic of the upper promenade. They were safe for a moment, lost in the swarm of civilian vehicles. Jace engaged the autopilot and slumped back, his heart hammering against his ribs. He looked at Sarilith. She was staring out the viewport at the station she was supposed to rule. "Talk to me," Jace said. "No more riddles." "What was that thing in the basement? What are you?" Sarilith didn't look away from the window. "I am a battery," she said quietly. "Excuse me?" "The seat," she said, turning to him. "It is not just a governing tool. It is a truth lattice, an ancient bioquantum computer designed to ensure that those who rule cannot lie. It connects to the nervous system of the regent. If they speak a falsehood during a session, the seat stops them. If they act against the people, the seat rejects them. She held up her hand, the faint golden glow still pulsing beneath her skin. It requires a specific biological interface to work, a bloodline engineered to tolerate the connection. My family was that bloodline. For 1,000 years, we sat in the chair and let the machine burn the truth out of us. And the council? Jace asked. They grew tired of the truth, Sarilith said. They wanted power without the check. So they killed my family. They destroyed the lineage, or they thought they did. They kept me, just in case. They used my blood to try and trick the machine, to create a bypass so they could rule without the lattice. Jace stared at her. The pieces clicked into place. The prison transport. The silence. The accident meant to erase her. So you are not just a refugee, Jace said, his voice hardening. You are the rightful owner of the lie detector. I am the heir, she corrected. And me? Jace asked. What am I? Just the wrench you used to open the door? Sarilith flinched. She looked at him, her eyes wide. No, she said. You needed a tech, Jace said, the adrenaline turning into a bitter taste in his mouth. You needed someone stupid enough to splice a wire and someone with clearance to get you into the core. That is it, right? I am just a tool. The shuttle hit a pocket of turbulence, violently shaking the cabin. They were thrown against their restraints. The cockpit was small, intimate, and suddenly the distance between them felt non-existent. Sarilith unbuckled. It was dangerous, reckless. She turned in her seat, leaning toward him. I needed you, she said fiercely. Yes, I needed your hands. I needed your code. But I did not plan for this. She gestured between them, to the empty air that hummed with the invisible tension of the resonance bond. I did not plan to feel you, Jace. I did not plan to feel your fear, or your stubbornness, or the way you cover your bravery with jokes because you are terrified of being a hero. The resonance flared. Jace felt it, a wave of raw, unfiltered emotion crashing into him. It was not manipulation. It was too messy, too hot. He felt her guilt. He felt her terrifying longing. He felt that she wanted to survive. But more than that, she wanted him to look at her and see Sarilith, not the seat. They stared at each other. The shuttle rattled. Outside, the galaxy spun. Inside, the air was thick enough to choke on. Their faces were inches apart. Jace could see the flecks of gold in her violet eyes. He could see the small scar on her lip. His hand moved. He wanted to touch her. He wanted to bridge the gap that the resonance had already crossed. His eyes dropped to her mouth, then back to her eyes, heavy, hungry, terrified. Sarilith raised her hand. She extended 2 fingers, hovering them near his jawline. She did not touch him. She waited, asking. Jace swallowed. He nodded. It was a small movement, but it was everything. Sarilith closed the distance. She pressed her fingers against the seal of his flight helmet, right over his pulse point. She leaned her forehead against his helmet glass. Ground me, she whispered. Jace closed his eyes. He focused on his breathing. He focused on the warmth of her fingers through the glass. I am here, he said. I am not going anywhere. The moment stretched, suspended in time, a fragile bubble of intimacy in the middle of a high-speed chase. Then the drone, which had apparently unmuted itself, flashed a bright red light. Biological compatibility, extremely inconvenient, the drone announced at maximum volume. Suggestion, focus on the missiles. Jace jumped. Sarilith jerked back, hitting her head on the canopy. I am going to scrap that robot, Jace muttered, grabbing the flight stick. We are approaching the ceremonial landing pad, Sarilith said, her voice breathless but steady. Get us down. Jace banked the shuttle toward the massive spire of the council chamber. The landing platform was crowded with security skiffs, but Jace ignored them. He triggered the diplomatic override code Saralith recited to him. This is a Priority 1 landing. Jace broadcasted on the open channel. Make a hole, or I will make one for you. The security skiffs scattered. The station's legal AI, recognizing the authority codes from the seat core, shifted its tone. The sirens changed from the harsh blare of intruder alert to the deep, resonant chimes of a protocol event. The shuttle slammed down on the platform, skidding to a halt. The canopy hissed open. Saralith stood up. She pulled the stolen maintenance cloak around her shoulders like a royal mantle. She fastened the few scraps of ceremonial armor she still had. She looked wild, dangerous, and undeniable. Stay here, she told Jace. No, Jace said, unbuckling. I have come this far. I want to see them kneel. They ran down the ceremonial access corridor. The blast doors to the council chamber loomed ahead. They were sealed, guarded by a dozen elite sentinels in gold armor. The sentinels raised their energy pikes. Halt! The captain roared. Saralith did not slow down. She raised her wrist, where the bloodline mark was now glowing with a steady, piercing light. Open, she commanded. The sentinels hesitated. The station AI spoke over the intercom, its voice booming. Regent identity verified. Truth lattice active. Access granted. The sentinels' armor locked up. Their suits froze in place, overridden by the station's core. The blast doors slammed open. Saralith stepped into the council chamber. It was a cavernous amphitheater, lined with rows of floating pods where hundreds of species sat in judgment. At the center was the dais, and the empty spot where the seat usually connected. The room fell silent. Counselor Varric stood at the center podium. He was a tall, elegant humanoid with silver skin and a voice like poured silk. He had been in the middle of explaining why the current crisis required emergency powers for himself. He stopped. He looked at Saralith. "Seize her!" Varric shouted, pointing a manicured finger. "She is an escaped prisoner, a terrorist." Security drones dropped from the ceiling. Saralith did not flinch. She walked toward the center of the room. As she walked, the seat interface in the floor, the counterpart to the one in the basement, activated remotely. A halo of blue glyphs erupted from the ground, surrounding her in a cylinder of light. The drones hit the light and bounced off, their circuits frying instantly. Saralith stopped in the center of the halo. She looked up at the hundreds of faces staring down at her. She looked at Varric. "I am Saralith of the First Line," she announced, her voice amplified by the room itself. "And I invoke the audit." Jace had stopped in the shadows of a viewing balcony, just inside the blast doors. He watched her. He saw the way the light caught her violet skin. He saw the terrified awe on the faces of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. He saw the woman who had eaten a nutrient bar in a laundry chute now commanding the attention of empires. He leaned against the wall, stunned, his throat tight. "I helped an alien woman escape," Jace whispered to himself, the reality finally crashing down on him. The next day she ruled the council. Varric laughed. It was a confident, practiced sound. "The audit?" Varric sneered. "You are a relic, my dear. A failed experiment. The council determines truth here, not your superstitious machinery." He tapped a command into his podium. "Override the lattice," Varric muttered to his aides. "Jam the signal." A high-pitched whine filled the air. Varric was trying to broadcast a forbidden signal, a scrambler code designed to confuse the seat. Saralith smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Rule is not inherited," she recited, her voice cutting through the whine. "It is proven under truth." She swept her hand forward. The halo of glyphs expanded, washing over the entire chamber. It hit Varric like a physical wave. The scrambler signal died. The truth lattice slammed online. Varric opened his mouth to lie. He tried to say, "She is insane." What came out was, "She is the regent." He clapped a hand over his mouth, his eyes bulging. The seat had compelled his vocal cords. He tried to fight it. He tried to spin a new narrative. "I stole the funds," he blurted out. "I paid the assassins." The chamber erupted. Gasps, shouts, panic. Varric fell to his knees, clutching his throat. The seat rejected him violently, a pulse of force knocking him backward off the podium. The station's legal AI spoke again. Truth confirmed. Antagonist identified. Counselor Varric removed from quorum, recognizing Sarilith as acting regent. A shimmer of energy passed over the audience pods. Half the chamber, the corrupt, the complicit, the liars, were forced to their knees by compliance fields, their pods locked in place. The other half, the honest or the merely confused, remained free, staring in shock. Sarilith stood amidst the chaos, untouched, absolute. She looked up at the balcony. She found Jace in the shadows. For a second, the regent was gone, and she was just Sarilith. She looked at him with a desperate relief. Then the doors behind Jace burst open. The station's elite guard, finally rebooted and under manual control from Varric's remaining loyalists, swarmed in. "There he is," a guard shouted. "The collaborator!" Jace raised his hands. "I am just the maintenance guy," Jace yelled. They didn't listen. 2 guards grabbed him, pinning his arms. They dragged him away from the balcony, back toward the corridor. "Secure the human," the guard commander ordered. "He is a liability. Detain him for his safety." Jace struggled, kicking out. "Sarilith," he shouted. Down in the pit, Sarilith turned. She saw him being dragged away. The golden light of the seat flared around her, turning red at the edges. "Stop!" she commanded. The guards hesitated, but they were outside the direct range of the lattice halo. They kept moving, dragging Jace into the darkness of the hallway. Sarilith took a step forward. The compliance fields hummed. The kneeling counselors trembled. She looked at the guard commander on the upper tier. Her voice was calm. It was the calm of a singularity before it consumes a star. "Bring him to me," Sarilith ordered. The entire chamber vibrated with the force of her will. "Unharmed," she added. "That is not a request." The guards marched Jace through the gilded corridors of the executive spire, their grips on his arms tight enough to bruise. They did not speak to him. To them, he was a variable that had not yet been solved, a stain on the pristine mathematics of the council's hierarchy. They stopped before a set of double doors that looked less like an entrance to a bedroom and more like the airlock to a bank vault. The doors slid open with a heavy, pressurized hiss. The guards shoved him inside and retreated, the doors sealing instantly behind them. Jace stumbled, catching his balance. He looked around. This was the Regent's suite. It was a space designed to intimidate entire solar systems. The ceiling was 30 feet high, dominated by a chandelier made of suspended starlight crystals. The floor was polished obsidian, reflecting Jace's grease-stained maintenance coveralls like a dark mirror. But for all its grandeur, the room smelled strange. It smelled of aggressive antiseptic, stale recirculated air, and the sharp, coppery tang of revolution. It smelled like a hospital where someone had just won a war. Sarilith stood by the panoramic window, her back to him. She was no longer wearing the stolen maintenance cloak or the mismatched armor scraps. She was draped in a heavy robe of shimmering midnight blue fabric that seemed to absorb the light, though her feet were bare against the cold floor. The bloodline mark on her wrist still pulsed with a faint, rhythmic light, syncing with the distant hum of the station's core. She did not turn around immediately. "Leave us," she said to the empty room. Jace frowned. "Who are you talking to? The guards are gone." "Monitoring devices," Saralith said, her voice tight. "Audio pickups, thermal sensors. I disabled the primary network, but the redundant systems are stubborn." She turned then. The exhaustion on her face was profound. Her violet eyes were rimmed with dark circles, and the bruise on her cheekbone had darkened to a deep indigo. But the power radiating off her, the sheer physical pressure of her presence was heavier than before. It made the air in the room feel thick. "They are off now," she said. "We are private." Jace exhaled, a sharp, angry sound. "Private," he repeated. "That is a funny word for a prisoner. You ordered them to drag me here, unharmed, sure, but dragged nonetheless." "I had to get you out of the corridor," Saralith said, stepping toward him. "Varric's loyalists would have killed you the moment the cameras looked away." "So I am what?" Jace asked, stepping back. "A guest? A hostage? A pet?" Saralith flinched. The words seemed to strike her physically. "Do not say that." "Why not?" Jace snapped. "It is what they are saying on the news feeds. I saw the hollows in the lift, the human pet of the usurper queen. The maintenance rat she kept for amusement. He was shouting now, the adrenaline of the last hour boiling over into reckless anger. He had saved her. He had risked his life, his job, and his very existence for her. And now he was locked in a gold cage while she wore the crown. I want answers." "Saralith," Jace demanded, "you said you didn't plan to feel me. You said you didn't plan for the bond, but you knew the seat would answer you. You knew walking into that core was going to start a civil war." "I suspected," Saralith shot back, her voice rising to match his. "I hoped. But I did not know you would be foolish enough to follow me into the fire. I thought you would run the moment the door opened." "I don't run!" Jace yelled. The air between them snapped. It was not a metaphor. A physical crack of static electricity discharged in the center of the room. The resonance bond, agitated by their rising heart rates, surged like a tidal wave. Jace gasped, clutching his chest. It felt like a hook had been driven behind his ribs and yanked. He could feel her pulse hammering in his own throat. He could feel the heat of her skin as if he were wearing it. The anger he felt dissolved, blurring terrifyingly fast into something else, a raw, desperate need that tasted like smoke and ozone. Saralith stumbled forward, catching herself on the back of a velvet chair. Her eyes were wide, the pupils blown black. "Jace," she whispered. She looked at him, and the connection slammed them together without them moving an inch. He felt her fear, but beneath it, he felt a hunger that mirrored his own. It was a desire born of survival, of two people who had looked into the abyss and found only each other staring back. It was heavy and hot and overwhelmingly loud. Jace took a step toward her. He wanted to cross the room. He wanted to close the distance and let the resonance burn the rest of the world away. Saralith took a step toward him. Her hand reached out, fingers trembling. Then she stopped. She froze, her bare foot hovering over the obsidian floor. She squeezed her eyes shut, her jaw clenching until the muscles jumped. She forced a breath in, held it, and exhaled slowly. "No," she said. Her voice was a ragged whisper, but it was absolute. Jace stopped. The rejection stung, sharp and immediate, but then he felt the reason for it echo through the bond. She wasn't stopping because she didn't want him. She was stopping because she could force him. The resonance went both ways, but she was the regent. She was the one with the power. If she called him, the bond might make it impossible for him to refuse. "Consent," Saralith breathed, opening her eyes. "It matters. It matters more than the momentum." She straightened up, pulling the heavy robe tighter around herself, creating a physical barrier to match the emotional one. "I will not claim you. Jace," she said, her voice gaining strength. "I spent 10 years in a cage. I was a tool. I was a key. I was a thing to be used. I will not turn around and make you a thing in my court. You are not my property. You are not my reward for surviving this day." Jace stared at her. The heat in his blood began to cool, replaced by a dull ache in his chest. He saw the rigid line of her shoulders. He saw how much it cost her to stand there and deny the connection that was screaming at them to merge. He let out a shaky breath and ran a hand through his hair. "Well," Jace said, his voice cracking slightly. "That is good, because I am terrible at taking orders. And I look awful in a collar. It was a weak joke. It was a deflection. But it was the only armor he had left." Sarilith offered him a small, sad smile. "You look terrible in orange hats, too," she said. Jace laughed, the sound breaking the suffocating tension. The resonance settled into a low, background hum, manageable again. "So," Jace said, leaning against a pillar, "if I am not a pet and I am not a prisoner, what am I? Because there is a mob of angry diplomats outside who want to space me." Sarilith walked over to a desk made of floating glass panels. She tapped the surface, bringing up a cloud of holographic displays. "The political situation is deteriorating," she said. "That is a polite way of saying everyone hates us," Jace noted, walking over to look at the displays. The screens showed news feeds from a dozen sectors. Allied species were demanding Sarilith step down, citing the illegality of her coup. Varric's faction, though the man himself was disgraced, had regrouped and was broadcasting from a secure bunker, calling Sarilith a bioterrorist who had hacked the station's AI. And then there were the tabloids. One headline read, "The Human Consort, Brainwashed or Bought." Sarilith swiped the headline away with a grimace. "I cannot release you," she said. "If you leave this suite, you will be arrested by sector police or assassinated by Varric's remnants. But I cannot keep you here as a guest. It looks compromising." "So I am stuck," Jace said. "No," Sarilith said. She turned to him. "I am appointing you as the official liaison to the Regent for non-standard systems and maintenance protocols." Jace blinked. "That is a made-up title?" "All titles are made up." "Jace," she said, "but this one comes with diplomatic immunity. It falls under the obscure station bylaw 704. As my liaison, you are an extension of the Regent's office. Touching you is an act of war against the seat." Jace raised an eyebrow. "Liaison. Does it come with a badge?" "It comes with a target," Sarilith said seriously. "But it keeps you alive, and it keeps you close." She looked at him, and for a second, the mask slipped. "I need you close. Jace, I do not know who else to trust." Jace looked at the hologram of the burning station news feeds. He looked at the woman who had just overthrown a government but didn't know how to order lunch. "Fine," Jace said. "I will be your liaison. But I am negotiating a raise. My drone needs new stabilizers." "Done," Sarilith said. "Now, grab your tools. We have work to do." "Work?" Jace asked. "We are going downstairs," Sarilith said, her eyes hardening. "Varric said the tribunal didn't exist. The seat rejected him, but it did not give us the details. I need proof. I need the records from the black site." "You want to go back down to the maintenance levels?" Jace asked. "Now?" "Not the maintenance levels," Sarilith said. "Lower. The Undercity. The Undercity of the Council Station was where gravity went to die and legality was a suggestion. It was located in the structural roots of the station. a tangled mess of gravity-tilted tunnels and unauthorized expansions. Here, the sleek black alloy of the upper levels gave way to rusted iron, neon signage in 100 languages, and steam venting from cracked pipes. Jace and Saralith moved through the crowd. Saralith wore a heavy hooded cloak that obscured her face, and Jace had donned his grease-stained coveralls, his liaison title currently invisible. The bazaar was a sensory assault. Vendors sold everything from illegal cybernetics to hallucinogenic moss. The air smelled of frying synth meat and ozone. "We need to find the data brokers," Jace whispered, leaning close to Saralith. "They operate out of the back of the kinetic coil shop." "Stay close," Saralith murmured. "The resonance is loud down here. Too many people." They found the shop, a cramped booth piled high with magnetic coils. The proprietor was a four-armed alien with eyes like multifaceted gemstones. "I need access to the archived transit logs for Sector 4, Jace said, leaning on the counter, specifically the shadow routes used by unmarked transports. The broker chittered, wiping a greasy rag over a coil. "Sector 4 logs are expensive, human, restricted data, 3,000 credits. 3,000? Jace sputtered. "That is robbery. I will give you 500 and a slightly used localized gravity dampener." The broker laughed, a sound like grinding gears. 3,000, or get out. Jace opened his mouth to argue, to explain that he didn't have 3,000 credits. But Saralith stepped forward. She did not lower her hood. She simply placed her hand on the counter. She did not activate the seat's full power that would have alerted the station, but she let a fraction of the resonance bleed into the metal of the counter. The coils on the shelves began to hum. The lights in the shop flickered in a rhythmic pattern. The broker stopped laughing. All four of his hands froze. "You are mistaken," Saralith said, her voice low and distorted by the hood. "The price is not 3,000. The price is 0. Because if you do not give us the logs, I will harmonize the frequency of every magnetic coil in this shop until they detonate." The broker stared at her. He could feel it, the sheer, terrifying potential energy radiating from her palm. 0 is a fair price. The broker squeaked. He shoved a data chip across the counter. Saralith took it. She turned and walked away, the coils immediately falling silent. Jace grabbed the chip and scrambled after her. "You enjoy that, don't you?" Jace whispered as they merged back into the crowd. "Terrifying people." Saralith adjusted her hood. "I enjoyed watching you try to barter with a gravity dampener you do not own." "I own it in spirit," Jace muttered. They followed the coordinates on the data chip. It led them away from the bazaar into a darker, quieter section of the Undercity. The tunnels here were old, lined with dormant server banks. They stopped in front of a rusted door marked "Archival Storage, Decommissioned." "This is it," Jace said. He bypassed the lock, a simple mechanical tumbler that was insultingly easy compared to the bloodlock upstairs. The door creaked open. Inside, sitting amidst towers of physical data tapes and old holographic projectors, was a small, elderly being. He looked like a tortoise that had evolved to file paperwork. His skin was wrinkled and gray, and he wore the tattered robes of a council archivist. He looked up as they entered, his eyes wide with fear. "I knew you would come," the archivist wheezed. "I knew the seat would send someone eventually." "Who are you?" Saralith asked, lowering her hood. "I am Orit," the archivist said. "I am the one who erased the names." Saralith stiffened. "You erased me. I had to," Orit cried, shrinking back. "They made me. But I kept copies. I kept everything. I knew. I knew it was wrong." He fumbled with the projector. A holographic image flickered to life in the dusty air. It showed a recording of a tribunal hearing. A prisoner sat in a chair, screaming, while a shadowy figure, Varric, stood over them. But it was not just torture. "Look closer," Orit whispered. Jace squinted at the image. On the back of the prisoner's neck, there was a small silver device burrowing into the skin. It pulsed with a sickly green light. "What is that?" Jace asked. "The oath worm," Orit said, his voice trembling. "It is not just a restraint, it is a parasite. A biocode organism. It latches onto the amygdala. It hijacks the fear response." Saralith stepped closer, her face pale. "Hijacks it how?" "It forces compliance," Orit said. "If the subject tries to disobey a direct command, the worm simulates the pain of dying. It is absolute control. They used it on the prisoners to make them confess to crimes they did not commit." He paused, looking up at Saralith with watery eyes. "But they did not just use it on prisoners. Regent, they used it on each other." Saralith froze. "What?" "Varric," Orit explained. "He and his inner circle. They infected the wavering counselors. Those who wanted to vote against him. Those who had doubts. They were not bribed. They were enslaved." Jace felt a cold chill run down his spine. "So the council was not just corrupt," Jace said. "It was compromised. Half those people kneeling in the chamber upstairs. They are not villains. They are victims." Saralith stared at the hologram. Her hand went to her own neck, a phantom memory of the collar she had worn. "The enemy is bigger," she whispered, "and sadder. I thought I was fighting cruelty. I am fighting slavery." "We need these records," Saralith said, her voice shaking with a new kind of resolve. "All of them." Orit nodded. "I have them on a master drive. But you must be careful. Varric knows I am here. He—" A high-pitched shriek cut through the air. It came from the bazaar outside. Screams. The sound of energy weapons. "And they found us," Jace said. He grabbed the master drive Orit held out. "Move!" They burst out of the storage room. The bazaar was in chaos and people were running, overturning stalls. In the center of the walkway, a council security drone, one of the standard floating spheres, had transformed. Its panels had shifted, revealing rows of spinning, razor-sharp blades. It was not shooting. It was carving a path through the air, heading straight for Saralith. "It's a hunter-seeker," Jace yelled. The drone accelerated, a silver blur of death. Saralith raised her hand, trying to summon the lattice, but the resonance was clouded by the panic of the crowd. Jace didn't think. He slammed his shoulder into Saralith, shoving her hard. "Get down!" He threw her behind a massive durasteel pillar. The drone shrieked past where she had been standing, its blades sparking against the metal floor. It turned, air brakes hissing, reorienting for a second strike. It locked onto Jace. Jace scrambled backward, reaching for his hydrospanner, which was woefully inadequate against a flying blender. Saralith, from the ground, snapped. She did not scream. She commanded, "Halt!" She thrust her hand out from behind the pillar. The bloodline mark on her wrist flared so bright it illuminated the entire cavern. The truth lattice responded. It did not just project light, it hardened the air itself. A wall of solid golden force materialized between Jace and the drone. The drone slammed into the barrier at full speed. There was a sickening crunch of metal. The blades shattered. The drone crumpled like a tin can, falling to the floor in a shower of sparks. Silence fell over the bazaar. Jace stared at the smoking wreckage. He looked at Saralith. She was still on the ground, her hand extended, her chest heaving. She lowered her hand. The golden wall dissolved. "Are you hit?" she asked. Her voice was thin, terrified. Jace checked his limbs. "No. I am good. You?" Saralith nodded, but she was shaking. "We have the drive," Jace said, helping her up. Let's get out of here before its friends show up. The medbay in the Regent's spire was quiet. It was a stark white room, sterile and cold, a sharp contrast to the grime of the Undercity. Saralith sat on the edge of a diagnostic bed. She had refused a doctor, insisting she just needed a moment to stabilize her biometrics. Jace stood by the door, watching her. He had cleaned the grease off his face, but the adrenaline was still humming in his veins. "You saved me," Saralith said softly. She was looking at her hands. "You saved me back," Jace said. "That is how the buddy system works." Saralith looked up. The composure she had worn like armor all day finally cracked. Her lip trembled. "I could have lost you," she whispered. "Down there. I cannot control everything. The seat gives me power, but it does not make me a god. I was too slow." "You were fast enough," Jace said, walking over to her. He stopped in front of her. She looked so small sitting there, despite the power she held. Saralith reached out. Her hand hovered near his waist, near the seam of his flight suit. She looked at him, asking with her eyes. Jace nodded. "Yes." She placed her hands on the heavy fabric of his suit, gripping the material. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his chest. She did not touch his skin, but the contact was electric. Jace brought his hands up, hesitating, then rested them on her shoulders, on the hard plating of her ceremonial armor. They breathed, in, out. The resonance bond flared, but this time it wasn't a storm. It was a steady, warm light. It was the feeling of being anchored. "I learned a lesson in the dark," Saralith murmured into his chest. "Power without tenderness becomes cruelty. That is what happened to Varric. That is what happened to the Council. They forgot how to feel." Jace rested his chin on the top of her head. "Tenderness without courage becomes surrender," he replied softly. "You cannot just feel, Saralith. You have to fight for the right to feel safe." She pulled back, looking up at him. Their faces were inches apart. The air was charged, aching with things unsaid. "We have the drive," she said, shifting back to the mission because looking at him was becoming dangerous in a way she couldn't afford. "We have the proof." Jace nodded, stepping back to give her space, though every instinct screamed at him to stay. "Let's see what Orit gave us." They walked over to the medbay's data terminal. Jace inserted the master drive. The screen lit up. Files scrolled past, thousands of them. Video logs, audio recordings, signed execution orders. It was everything. It was the end of Varric's faction. It was the proof that the Oathworm was real. "This is it," Jace said, grinning. "We broadcast this and—" The screen turned red. A skull icon appeared in the center of the display. "Access denied. Dead man protocol initiated." "What?" Jace hammered the keys. "No, no, no, it's booby-trapped." The terminal let out a screeching alarm. A recorded voice, Varric's voice, filled the room. "Regent Saralith, if you are hearing this, you have found my insurance policy. Did you think I would leave my secrets unguarded?" The lights in the medbay turned red. The lights in the corridor outside turned red. "Station-wide alert," the station AI announced. "Seismic charges detected at the base of the council seat. Timer active." Varric's voice continued, smooth and cruel. "The charges are keyed to the seat's structural supports. If you attempt to remove them, they detonate. If you attempt to hack them, they detonate." Saralith gripped the edge of the terminal. "What is the demand?" she hissed, as if answering her. The broadcast shifted to the station-wide PA system. Every speaker, from the executive spire to the Undercity Bazaar, crackled to life. "Residents of the council station," Varric's voice boomed. "Your station is held hostage by the usurper. I offer one chance for survival. The countdown appeared on every screen in the station. 6 hours. Dawn. If Sarilith remains regent at dawn, the council seat will be destroyed. The station creates its own grave. Jace looked at the timer ticking down. 5 hours, 59 minutes. Sarilith looked at Jace. Her face was pale, but her eyes were dry. "He wants me to leave," she said. "Or he kills everyone." Jace looked at the drive, then at the door. "Then we have 6 hours to find the bomb," Jace said. "And I am really good at maintenance." The countdown to the end of the world was projected on every surface of the council station. It pulsed in soft, terrifying crimson on the side of the grand promenades. It scrolled across the bottom of the data slates in the refugee sectors, and it reflected in the eyes of 10 million beings who were suddenly realizing that their government was not a protector, but a suicide pact. Panic did not spread like fire. Fire was too clean. Panic spread like a virus. In the civic rings, species that had lived side by side for centuries began eyeing each other with suspicion, barricading storefronts and hoarding oxygen canisters. The logic was simple and brutal. If the council seat was destroyed, the interspecies laws that bound the galaxy together would evaporate. Currencies would crash, borders would close, and the station itself, a marvel of engineering held together by the seat's gravitational regulation, might simply shear apart. This was exactly what Varric wanted. Chaos was not a byproduct of his plan, it was the engine. If the station devolved into anarchy, his faction could declare martial law, bypass the troublesome seat altogether, and rule by the barrel of a plasma cannon. In the regent's suite, the mood was not panicked. It was cold, focused, and furious. Sarilith stood before the panoramic window, watching the shuttle traffic thicken as diplomats tried to flee. "They are leaving," she said. "Let them leave," Jace replied from the communications desk. He was knee-deep in wiring, trying to bypass the station's compromised broadcast nodes. "The ones who run are the ones who were only here for the buffet." Sarilith turned. She looked less like a queen and more like a warrior waiting for the wall to breach. "I will not step down," she said. "I will not let him hold this station hostage. If I surrender the Regency, he detonates the charges anyway to cover his tracks. We have 4 hours. We have 4 hours to find a needle in a haystack," Jace corrected. "A quantum needle that explodes. We do not need to find it blindly," Sarilith said. "We need him to tell us where it is. Or rather, we need to force him into the light so the lattice can see him." She walked to the center of the room. "Open the channel." "Jace, I am convening a tribunal." Jace looked up, a wire stripper clamped between his teeth. "A tribunal?" he asked, spitting the tool into his hand. "You want to hold court while sitting on a bomb?" "I want to use the only weapon he cannot hack," Sarilith said. "The truth. The broadcast went out on all frequencies." It interrupted the panic, the evacuation orders, and the looting. It showed Sarilith, not sitting on a throne, but standing in the center of the council chamber, the truth lattice humming around her like a cage of golden light. She did not look perfect. She looked tired. She allowed the cameras to see the bruise on her cheek and the dust on her hem. "Citizens of the Concordat," she began. Her voice was steady, carried by the station's acoustic architecture. "You are being told that your safety depends on my surrender. That is a lie." She gestured to the empty podiums around her. "The council is not empty because I purged it. It is empty because your leaders are hiding. But I am here, and I am opening the floor." She looked directly into the camera lens. "And since the counselors will not speak, I have asked a citizen to speak for them." The camera cut to Jace. He was not ready. He was standing by a maintenance panel holding a data pad. looking like he had just crawled out of a ventilation shaft. He blinked at the camera drone. "Am I on?" Jace asked. "You are live." "Jace," Saralith said from the center of the room. "Tell them what you found in the water recycling manifests." Jace looked at the camera. He scratched the back of his neck. "Right. Okay. So, I was looking at the pipe pressure logs for the last 5 years. You know how when you flush a toilet, the water has to go somewhere? Well, apparently, for the last decade, the budget for water filtration in the refugee sectors was diverted to a slush fund marked exterior decoration. He tapped his data pad. Basically, you guys have been drinking unfiltered sludge so Councillor Varric could buy a second yacht, and the yacht is technically registered as a mobile diplomatic office, which is a tax write-off. The galaxy watched. They were used to polished speeches, complex legal jargon, and evasive answers. They were not used to a guy in grease-stained coveralls explaining corruption through the metaphor of plumbing. It was comedic, but it was also devastating. Jace was too blunt to be politically correct. He didn't know the polite words for embezzlement, so he just called it stealing. He didn't know the diplomatic terms for negligence, so he called it laziness. People laughed, and then they got angry. For an hour. Jace stood there, reading off the maintenance logs Saralith fed him. He exposed the structural rot of the council, not with high philosophy, but with receipts. He became the unexpected weapon, a man who simply pointed at the Emperor and said, loud and clear, that he was naked and owed back taxes. Varric, watching from his bunker, realized he had made a mistake. He had tried to paint Jace as a pet. Instead, Jace looked like the only honest man in the sky. Jace's headset chirped. "Private channel," the drone whispered in his ear. "Encryption level, maximum. It is Varric." Jace froze. He looked at Saralith, who was busy testifying about the oathworm. He stepped into the shadow of a pillar. "Put him through," Jace whispered. A small holographic window opened on his wrist display. Varric's face appeared. He looked calm, sitting in a leather chair swirling a glass of amber liquid. "Mr. Rourke," Varric said smoothly, "you are quite the performer. I had no idea plumbing could be so dramatic." "What do you want, Varric?" Jace hissed. "I want to offer you a ride," Varric said. He leaned forward, the hologram flickering. "I have a transport leaving the station in 20 minutes. It has a stealth drive. It is heading for Earth." Jace's heart skipped a beat. Earth, real air, real gravity, no bombs, no ancient alien politics. "Why?" Jace asked. "Because you are becoming a nuisance," Varric said. "And because I am a generous man. Testify against her, Jace. Just say she used mind control on you. Say the resonance forced you to help her. You get on the ship, you go home, and you live a long, happy life with a very large bank account." Jace looked at the hologram. He looked at the timer on the wall. 3 hours left. "If I stay?" Jace asked. "You die," Varric said simply. "The bomb is real. Jace, I will blow the seat. I will burn this station to the frame before I let that woman keep it. Do you really want to die for a stranger you met yesterday?" Jace looked across the room. Saralith was standing in the light, answering questions from a terrified ambassador. She looked lonely. She looked impossibly heavy under the weight of the crown. "She is not a stranger," Jace said. Varric raised an eyebrow. "Oh? Is she your lover, then? Do not be naive, boy. She is a queen. You are a mechanic. When this is over, even if she wins, do you think she keeps you?" Jace looked at his hands. He thought about the apartment on Earth he hadn't seen in 5 years. He thought about the quiet, safe life he had always wanted. He wanted to live. God, he wanted to live. But then he remembered the collar. He remembered the look in Sarah Lith's eyes when she asked him for permission to touch him. Freedom that costs someone else's life is just another cage, Jace said quietly. What was that? Varric asked. I said no, Jace said. And Varric? Yes? Your yacht is ugly. Jace severed the connection. He took a deep breath, his hands shaking, and walked back into the light. Sarah Lith looked at him. She knew. The resonance bond was humming with the echo of his temptation and the solidity of his choice. She didn't say thank you. She just nodded, a microscopic movement that meant everything. We have a trace, Jace said, his voice loud enough for the microphone. The signal Varric just used to call me, it didn't come from the bunker. It bounced off a repeater in the tribunal wing. The tribunal wing? Sarah Lith frowned. That sector has been sealed for 50 years. Exactly, Jace said. It is the perfect place to hide a bomb. The tribunal wing was a mausoleum of justice. It was located in the oldest part of the station, a labyrinth of sleek, black corridors that had been sealed off when the council decided that public executions were bad for tourism. The air here was stale, recycled for decades without fresh intake. The gravity was slightly too heavy, designed to make the accused feel small. Jace and Sarah Lith moved through the shadows. The station cameras were not broadcasting this. This was not for the public. Jace held a scanner, tracking the energy signature of the quantum charge. Sarah Lith walked beside him, her hand resting on the hilt of a stun baton she had taken from the armory. It is quiet, Jace whispered. Too quiet. It is the silence of the dead, Sarah Lith replied. They passed rows of glass cells, long empty. But then they reached the Hall of Records. It was a massive corridor lined with holographic plates, each one listing the ID of a prisoner processed through the wing. Sarah Lith stopped. She was looking at a plate near the end of the row. It was dusty, the light flickering. Subject, 7 Alpha 9, it read. Name, Sarah Lith. Status, non-existent. She stared at it. The official record of her life. Not dead. Non-existent. The council had not just imprisoned her, they had unmade her. Jace watched her. He saw the rage building in her, a cold, dark wave rising through the bond. They erased me, she whispered. To them. I am not even a ghost. Jace stepped closer. You are here, he said. You are standing right here. That sign is a liar. Sarah Lith reached out and smashed the glass plate with the hilt of her baton. The sound of shattering glass echoed like a gunshot. I am not a ghost, she hissed. I am the reckoning. She stepped over the shards, her stride lengthening. The bomb is this way. They found the charge core in the sub-basement, directly beneath the foundations of the seat. It was terrifyingly beautiful. A sphere of suspended antimatter, pulsing in time with the station's heartbeat. It was wired directly into the biometal roots of the seat, growing into them like a cancer. Jace scanned it. He swore softly. It is a quantum sync bomb, he said. It is not just a timer. It is keyed to the seat's biological rhythm. If we cut the power, it thinks the seat has died and it detonates. If we try to pry it off, it detonates. So how do we stop it? Sarah Lith asked. We have to trick it, Jace said. We have to feed it a false heartbeat. We have to convince it that the seat is still alive while we extract the core. Can you do that? Jace looked at the massive wires. I can build the bypass, he said, but I cannot generate the signal. The signal is biological. It needs a pulse. It needs you. Sarah Lith looked at the bomb. She understood immediately. I have to interface with it, she said. I have to connect my nervous system to the bomb and hold the synchronization steady while you pull the core. Jace nodded. His face was pale. It will hurt. Seralith, if the frequency slips, the feedback will go straight into your brain. It will feel like dying. I have died before, she said. Do it. She knelt on the cold floor, placing her hands on the exposed bio-roots of the seat. Jace knelt beside her. I am not letting you do this alone, he said. What are you doing? Seralith asked, alarm spiking in her voice. I am anchoring the maintenance side, Jace said, attaching sensors to his own temples. If you take the full load, your heart will stop. I am going to act as the ground. I will take the overflow. No! Seralith shouted. Jace, get back. This is not your burden. You are a civilian. I am your liaison, Jace shouted back. That means I stick to you. He grabbed her hand. We do this together, or we do not do it at all. Choose. Seralith. She looked at him. She saw the stubborn set of his jaw. She saw the terror in his eyes warring with a ferocious loyalty. She realized then that refusing his sacrifice was not protecting him. It was controlling him. It was treating him like a child, not a partner. She squeezed his hand. Together, she whispered. They closed their eyes. Jace initiated the link. The pain was immediate and blinding. It wasn't physical pain, it was the sensation of being unraveled. It was the feeling of every nerve ending in his body catching fire at once. He screamed. Seralith screamed. Through the bond. The walls between them dissolved. Jace felt her history. He felt the cold of the prison cell. He felt the crushing loneliness of the silence. And she felt him. She felt his fear of being small. She felt his desperate need to matter. She felt how much he loved the smell of cheap coffee and old engines. It was intimate in a way that made nakedness feel like armor. They were tangled in each other's souls, holding on to the thread of their combined consciousness while the bomb tried to tear them apart. Hold it. Jace gasped, his nose bleeding. Steady, I have it, Seralith cried out, her voice echoing in his head. I have the rhythm. Jace worked with one hand, his vision blurring. He twisted the locking mechanism of the core. His fingers were numb. He was operating on muscle memory and sheer spite. Almost. There. Suddenly, the drone floated down between them. Its speaker crackled to life at maximum volume. Chapter 4, the drone announced cheerfully. The Duke's velvet breeches were tight, but his desire was tighter. Oh, Penelope, he breathed. Your eyes are like pools of... Jace, his eyes streaming with tears of agony, kicked out blindly. His boot connected with the drone, sending it clattering into a toolbox. Shut up, Jace roared. My optical sensors are misaligned. The drone beeped from the corner. I was just trying to provide morale. The absurdity of it, the romance novel in the middle of the execution, gave Jace the second of clarity he needed. He wrenched the core free. The connection snapped. The pain vanished instantly, leaving them gasping, hollowed out, and shivering on the floor. The bomb was dead. The sphere went dark. Jace collapsed onto his back, staring at the ceiling. Did we win? He wheezed. Seralith was slumped over the roots of the seat. She pulled herself up, wiping blood from her nose. We won, she whispered. She looked at the deactivated core. She reached out and touched the casing. Wait, she said. What? Jace asked, trying to sit up. She pried open the panel on the side of the bomb. Inside, stamped on the quantum microprocessor, was a logo. It was not a council seal. It was a jagged, stylized spear. Jace, look at this. Jace dragged himself over. Ares Vanguard. Jace read, That is a corporate syndicate. They sell planetary defense systems. Why would a defense contractor give a bomb to Varric? Seralith asked. Jace felt a cold pit in his stomach. Because war is profitable, he said. If the council falls, every planet in the sector needs to buy its own fleet. They didn't just want Varric to rule, they wanted the peace to break. Saralith stared at the logo. The council wasn't just corrupt, she said, her voice turning to ice. It was monetized. We were a sales demo. She tried to stand. Her legs folded instantly. Saralith. Jace moved faster than he thought possible. He caught her before she hit the floor. His arms went around her, pulling her weight against him. It was full body contact, chest to chest, tangled limbs. But it wasn't erotic. It was the desperate clutch of survival. She grabbed his flight suit, burying her face in his neck. She was shaking violently. "I have you," Jace whispered, holding her tight. "I have you. You are safe." She clung to him like a drowning woman clinging to a raft. For a minute, the regent was gone. The warrior was gone. There was only a person who had been strong for too long and finally had permission to collapse. They stayed like that until the shaking stopped. Later, back in the suite, the atmosphere had changed. The bomb was gone. The threat was neutralized. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a raw, exposed nerve. Jace stood by the window, looking out at the station. The panic was subsiding. The lights were returning to normal. Saralith came out of the refresher. She was wearing a simple tunic, her hair damp. She looked cleaner, but the intensity in her eyes was back. She walked up to him. She didn't stop until she was standing inside his personal space. Jace turned. "Hey," he said softly. Saralith didn't speak. She reached out and traced the line of his jaw with her thumb. The touch was electric. The resonance bond, no longer fighting a bomb, flooded the space between them with a sudden, overwhelming desire. It was demanding. It was the biological imperative of two people who had survived death and wanted to prove they were alive. Jace's breath hitched. He wanted to kiss her. He wanted to pull her close and never let go. But he stopped. He took her hand and gently pulled it away from his face. "Not here," Jace whispered. His voice was rough with want. Saralith looked at him, her eyes searching. "Why?" she asked. "Because half the galaxy is watching this room," Jace said, nodding at the ceiling where the sensors were. "And because we are still afraid." He squeezed her hand. "I don't want this to be an escape. Saralith, I don't want us to collide just because we almost died. When I kiss you, and I really, really want to kiss you, I want it to be because we are free, not because we are running." Saralith stared at him. Then, slowly, she nodded. "A promise." She said, "A promise." Jace agreed. She stepped back, putting a respectful distance between them. The desire remained, a low heat in the room, but it was controlled now. It was something they owned, not something that owned them. "We have work to do," Saralith said, her voice regaining its steel. "We have the proof. We have the syndicate's name." She walked to the desk. "It is time to finish the tribunal." The final broadcast of the day was a bloodbath, legally speaking. Saralith returned to the council chamber. This time, she didn't ask for volunteers. She used the authority of the seat to issue warrants. Based on the evidence recovered and the testimony of the Truth Lattice, she announced, "I am ordering the immediate arrest of the following counselors for conspiracy, treason, and biological enslavement. Security teams, now loyal to the Regent, moved into the pods." Counselors who had been secretly controlled by the Oathworm were taken into medical custody. Those who were complicit were put in irons. It was a purge, but it was done in the light. Every charge was read. Every evidence file was displayed. Jace stood on the balcony watching. He felt a grim satisfaction. They were winning. But Varric was not among the arrested. Suddenly, The lights in the chamber shifted from the warm gold of the seat to a harsh, blinking purple. A holographic projection of Varric appeared in the center of the room, larger than life. He was no longer in the bunker. He was on the bridge of a warship. Regent Saralith, Varric's voice boomed. You claim to rule by truth, but you have forgotten the first law of the Concordat. Saralith looked up, her face calm. The first law is the protection of life, she said. Incorrect. Varric smiled. The first law is that the Regency must be ratified by a quorum of species, and you are unratified. He held up a datapad. I have just triggered an emergency vote of no confidence. I have the proxy codes for 20 sectors. They have voted to declare your Regency illegal. The station's AI spoke, its voice confused. Vote acknowledged. Processing. Regency status suspended. The golden light of the lattice flickered and died. The compliance fields dropped. Saralith stood alone on the dais, defenseless. By the authority of the emergency quorum, Varric announced, I declare you an enemy of the state and your human accomplice. He pointed a finger at the balcony where Jace stood. He is now an enemy combatant. Kill on sight. The doors to the balcony burst open. Jace turned to see a squad of soldiers, mercenaries wearing the jagged spear logo of the Ares Vanguard, charging in. He looked down at Saralith. She looked up at him. The distance between them was 200 feet of empty air and a sudden, violent silence. Run! She screamed. The council chamber had transformed from a place of governance into a gladiatorial arena where the weapons were procedural laws and the blood was reputation. The emergency session Varric had triggered was not a debate. It was a siege. The chamber itself seemed to be warring against its own architecture. The floating platforms, usually arranged in a harmonious sphere to suggest equality, were now jagged and tiered, drifting aggressively like ice flows crashing together. The species banners, massive holograms of cultural pride, had been sharpened by the graphical interface into blade-like slivers that hung ominously over the heads of the delegates. And above it all, the truth lattice, the golden cage of absolute honesty that Saralith had summoned, was flickering. It stuttered like a dying fluorescent bulb. Every few seconds, a wave of static washed over the golden light, turning it a bruised purple. The sabotage was not just coming from one source, it was hitting the lattice from 1,000 hidden nodes. A distributed denial of reality that made the very air feel nauseating. Saralith stood on the central dais, fighting to keep her footing as the floor plates shifted beneath her. She looked small against the backdrop of political violence, but she did not look weak. Varric, projected 10 times larger than life from his command ship, looked down at her with the confidence of a man who had already read the script. The Regent is illegitimate. Varric's voice boomed, rattling the teeth of every being in the room. The vote is clear. The sectors have spoken. Saralith raised her hand. She did not shout. She simply accessed the audio feed of the room through the seat's interface. The sectors spoke under duress. Saralith said. Her voice was calm, cutting through the bombast. And since you wish to speak of legitimacy, let us look at the records. She swiped her hand through the air. The flickering lattice responded, tearing open a holographic window in the center of the room. It was not a polished presentation. It was raw data. Saralith unveiled the tribunal recordings they had stolen from the Undercity. She did not play them in order. She released them in fragments, a chaotic storm of evidence that forced the chamber to react before Varric could spin the narrative. A video of a signed execution order floated past a delegation from the reptilian Argus cluster. A voice log of a bribe played directly in front of the Trade Federation pod. Lies! a counselor shouted from the third tier. These are deep fakes. Sarilith turned to the shouting counselor. Then testify, she challenged. Step into the lattice and say it is a fake. The counselor shrank back, terrified of the flickering gold light. Varric saw he was losing the momentum. He needed a villain. He needed a distraction. Bring out the human, Varric commanded. Let us hear from the pet. The floor of the dais split open. A containment field rose up, holding Jace Rourke. Jace looked terrible. His flight suit was scorched. His face was smeared with grease and dried blood from the bomb defusal, and his hands were cuffed in front of him with energy shackles. He blinked in the harsh lights of the arena. Jace Rourke, Varric sneered, the maintenance technician who thinks he is a kingmaker. Tell the galaxy, Mr. Rourke, how much did she pay you to sabotage the station? Jace looked at the floating platforms. He looked at the millions of eyes watching through the camera drones. He looked at Sarilith, who was watching him with a terrifying stillness. Unable to intervene without breaking the rules of the session she had called. He took a breath. He leaned toward the microphone field. She didn't pay me anything, Jace said. Actually, I think I am still owed for overtime. A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the chamber. Silence, Varric roared. Confess your crimes. You spliced the security grid. You aided a fugitive. Yeah, I did, Jace said. His voice changed. The humor evaporated, leaving behind a hard, jagged edge of outrage. I spliced the grid because I found a woman in a box. He looked up at the camera drones, staring directly into the lens. You guys talk about treaties and high laws. You sit in these floating chairs and wear silk robes. But down in Sector 4, in the dark, I saw what you actually do. He held up his cuffed hands. She wasn't wearing a crown when I found her. She was wearing a collar, and it wasn't a piece of jewelry. It was a leash. It was designed to melt her brain if she had a thought you didn't approve of. He turned to the counselors. I am a maintenance guy. I fix toilets. I repair air recyclers. I deal with the crap you people don't want to see. And I know a broken system when I see one. You didn't lock her up because she was dangerous. You locked her up because she was the only thing on this station that couldn't be bought. The chamber was silent. The simplicity of it, the image of a collar, the reality of the dark tunnels made the complex political lies collapse under their own weight. Varric's projection flickered. He was losing them. The narrative of the terrorist queen was dissolving into the story of a victim and a rescuer. He played his trump card. Touching sentiment, Varric said, his voice dripping with faux pity. But you are a simple creature, Jace. You do not understand what you rescued. Varric gestured, and a new set of data filled the air. It was a genetic profile, a double helix that looked twisted, spliced with artificial markers. She is not of the first line, Varric announced. She is a construct, a lab experiment grown in a tube to mimic the biological key of the seat. Her bloodline is manufactured. The accusation hit the chamber like a physical blow. In the Council's culture, lineage was everything. To be manufactured was to be soulless. It was an insult designed to reduce Sarilith from a person to a product. She is a counterfeit, Varric shouted. A biological forgery. She has no right to the seat because she has no soul. Sarilith stood motionless. The insult was designed to humiliate her, to strip away her humanity in front of the galaxy. She looked at the twisted helix floating in the air. She looked at Varric. I am not my blood, she said. Her voice was not loud, but the lattice amplified it, carrying it to the furthest corners of the room. My blood is simply the key you stole, she continued, stepping forward. You obsess over the lock because you are afraid of what is behind the door. You call me a forgery because I survived the fire you built to burn me. Prove it, Varric challenged. Submit to a genetic audit. Let the medical drone sample your sequence live. Unless you are afraid the plastic will show. It was a trap. Jace knew it was a trap. He surged against his restraints. Sarilith, don't! Jace shouted. Sarilith looked at Jace. She gave him a microscopic shake of her head. She had to do it. Confidence was louder than offense. If she refused, she looked guilty. If she accepted, she called his bluff. I accept, Sarilith said. A medical drone descended from the ceiling. It was sleek, white, and bristling with needles. Sarilith extended her arm. The bloodline mark on her wrist pulsed rhythmically. The drone latched onto her arm. A silver needle slid into her vein. The chamber held its breath. Then, the twist happened. The drone did not just take blood. It injected something. Sarilith gasped. Her eyes went wide. She stumbled back, clutching her arm. The golden light of the seat interface stuttered violently. The lattice overhead groaned, the energy turning a sickly, necrotic gray. Sarilith fell to one knee. Her skin, usually a luminous violet, turned ashen. The mark on her wrist dimmed until it was almost invisible. The station AI announced, genetic anomaly detected, user interface destabilized, connection lost. Varric smiled. It was the smile of a predator who had just snapped the neck of its prey. Medical concern, Varric shouted. The subject is unstable. She is rejecting the interface. Seize her before the feedback destroys the seat. He hadn't proved she was fake. He had poisoned her to make it look like she was failing. Security teams flooded the dais, not the royal guards, but Varric's private contractors, the ones wearing the jagged spear logo. Get her out of there, Jace screamed. Jace threw his body weight against the containment field. The energy barrier sparked, burning his shoulder, but he didn't stop. He kicked the generator node at the base of the field. He was a tech. He knew that military hardware was always built by the lowest bidder. The generator housing cracked. The field flickered. Jace smashed his energy cuffs against the exposed circuitry. There was a blinding flash of ozone and sparks. The cuffs shorted out. The field dropped. Jace sprinted across the dais. He tackled the nearest mercenary who was reaching for Sarilith, driving his shoulder into the man's gut. He grabbed the stun baton from the merc's belt and swung it backward, catching a second guard in the helmet. Sarilith, Jace yelled, hauling her up. She was dead weight for a second, her eyes unfocused, the poison, or whatever it was, coursing through her. They rigged it. She slurred. I know, Jace grunted, dragging her. Run now, audit later. They ran toward the debating halls. Seal the exits, Varric's voice boomed from the speakers. Isolate Sector 1. The council chamber began to reconfigure. The walls shifted. The floor plates rotated. The debate halls were designed to be modular, allowing for different configurations of discussion. Now, they were a puzzle box of closing traps. Jace and Sarilith sprinted into the hall of arguments. The floor tilted 45 degrees. Gravity shifted. Up, Jace shouted. They scrambled up the wall, which was becoming the floor. Blast doors slammed shut inches behind their heels. They were in the labyrinth now. Corridors dead-ended into solid walls. Staircases led to drops into nothingness. Sarilith stumbled, leaning heavily against Jace. The drug was fighting her metabolism, but her alien physiology was burning it off fast. Her eyes were clearing, the violet fire returning. The seat core, she gasped. I need to get back to the core, the connection. I need to reassert the bond manually. If the interface thinks I am dead, it will shut down the station's life support. The elevators are locked, Jace said, checking his wrist comp. Not the service lifts, Sarilith said. the old gravity shafts. They forced open a maintenance hatch and tumbled into the shaft of a service elevator. The car was dead, hanging suspended in the dark shaft by emergency brakes. Jace pried the doors of the car open. They fell inside, collapsing onto the metal floor. The car shuddered. The gravity plating in the shaft was failing, fluctuating between 0G and standard pull. Jace hit the manual override. The car groaned and began a slow, jerky descent. They were alone. The sounds of the pursuit were muffled by the thick alloy walls. Saralith sat with her back against the wall, breathing hard. She looked at her wrist. The mark was flickering, fighting to stay lit. "I am afraid," she whispered. Jace looked at her. He was checking the charge on the stolen stun baton. "Of Varric?" Jace asked. "Don't worry, I have a stick." "No," Saralith said. She looked up at him, and her eyes were terrifyingly open. "I am afraid of what I am becoming." She gestured to the ceiling, toward the chamber they had just fled. "I used the lattice to hurt them. Jace, I used the truth as a weapon. I exposed their secrets to humiliate them. How is that different from what they did to me? They used a collar. I used a broadcast. But we both used force to make people kneel." Jace dropped the baton. He crossed the small space between them. The gravity in the elevator failed completely. They floated up from the floor, suspended in the cool, recycled air. Jace hooked his foot under a handrail to anchor himself. Saralith drifted, her tunic rippling around her like water. Jace reached out and took her hands. They were cold. "It is different," Jace said firmly. "How?" Saralith asked. Her voice broke. "Because you are asking the question," Jace said. "Varric never asked if he was wrong. He never looked in the mirror and saw a monster. You do. That is the difference between a tyrant and a ruler. You are afraid of the power. That is why you should have it." Saralith looked at him. They were floating inches apart, their faces level. The emergency lights bathed them in a soft red glow. The resonance bond flared. It wasn't the violent storm of the argument, and it wasn't the desperate survival instinct of the bomb. It was quiet. It was steady. It was the hum of two instruments finally finding the same key. "I do not want to be a ruler," Saralith whispered. "I just want to be—" "What?" Jace asked. "Yours." She breathed. "But not because I have to be." Jace's heart hammered against his ribs. "I am not a fan of ownership," Jace whispered. "But I am a big fan of partnership." Their hands were trembling where they touched. The air between them felt thick, charged with 100 hours of terror and adrenaline and moments of quiet grace. Saralith leaned in. "This isn't an escape?" she asked, echoing his words from earlier. "No," Jace said. "This is an arrival." They kissed. It was brief. It was intense. It was fully mutual. It was the collision of a supernova and a planet, a meeting of the cosmic and the grounded. It tasted of blood and ozone and the sweet, terrifying promise of tomorrow. For 3 seconds. The war didn't exist. Varric didn't exist. There was only the sensation of floating in the dark, held by someone who knew exactly who you were and didn't want to change a single pixel. They pulled apart, breathless. Footsteps clanged on the roof of the elevator car. Magnetic boots. "They are here," Jace whispered. The reality of the siege came rushing back, but the fear was different now. It wasn't the panic of the hunted. It was the focus of the protectors. Saralith looked at Jace. Her eyes were clear. The doubt was gone. "Let's go to work," she said. Jace kicked off the wall, shoving the ceiling hatch open. They scrambled up through the shaft just as the cutters began to burn through the elevator doors below. They reached the seat core. The great blooming door was already open. The chamber inside was dark, the floating monoliths dormant. The biometal throne pulsed with a weak, irregular rhythm, like a heart in fibrillation. Sarilith ran to the interface. She didn't sit. She drove her hands into the fiber optic roots. The room lit up, but the light wasn't gold. It was a sickly web of green veins pulsing through the floor. It is not just code, Sarilith realized, her voice horrified. She stared at the holographic display projecting from the seat. Varric didn't just jam the signal. He activated the Oathworm network. Jace looked at the screen. It showed thousands of biosignatures across the station. Counselors, guards, even civilians. They were all lighting up with the same frantic green pattern. "He is broadcasting a fear signal," Jace said. "He is triggering the parasites. He is telling every infected person on this station that they are about to die if they don't obey him." "That is why the lattice failed," Sarilith said. "The truth lattice works on consensus. It works on the collective will of the station. If thousands of people are screaming in terror at the same subconscious frequency, it drowns out the truth. It creates a noise floor we cannot break through. We have to shut it down," Jace said. "Can we isolate the signal?" "No," Sarilith said. "The worms are bio-coded. If I cut the signal abruptly, the shock will kill the hosts. If I turn off the network, I kill half the council." Jace stared at her. "That is his failsafe. If he loses, he takes everyone with him." Sarilith looked at the pulsing green map. She saw the lives represented by those dots, people who had called her a monster, people who had voted to erase her. She closed her eyes. She reached into the resonance, feeling the seat's potential. "There is another way," she said softly. "What?" "I can broadcast an antidote," she said. "The lattice is bioacoustic. I can invert the frequency. I can send a pattern that tells the worms to go dormant. A song of safety." "But?" Jace asked. He heard the but in her voice. "But the seat is designed to receive truth, not project biological commands," Sarilith said. "If I force the signal outward, I will have to use my own neural pathways as the amplifier. It will burn me out. Jace, it might sever my connection to the seat forever. I might never be able to rule again." Jace looked at her. He saw the choice she was making. She was choosing to save the people who hated her, at the cost of the crown she had fought for. She was choosing to be a savior, not a queen. "Do it," Jace said. Sarilith smiled. It was a sad, beautiful smile. "Hold the line." "Jace." She stepped into the seat. She sat down. The biometal tendrils wrapped around her, fusing with her spine. She screamed as the connection took hold. The room exploded with light. In the council chamber above, the chaos halted. The security teams were advancing on the few remaining loyalists. Varric was shouting orders from the screens. Then, a sound filled the air. It wasn't a siren, and it wasn't a voice. It was a tone, low, resonant, and impossibly clear. It vibrated in the teeth and the bones. It felt like the moment after a fever breaks. It felt like cool water. The green veins of the Oathworm signal shattered. All over the station, people froze. In the council pods, the infected officials gasped. The silver parasites on their necks went gray and dormant. The artificial fear, the screaming compulsion that had driven them for years, vanished. Counselor Harnish, who had called for Sarilith's execution an hour ago, collapsed to his knees. He blinked, looking at his hands. He looked at the chaos around him. He remembered what he had done. He remembered the lies he had told, not because he wanted to, but because the worm had made the truth hurt like fire. He began to sob. It wasn't the sobbing of a child. It was the deep, racking grief of a man waking up from a nightmare to find he had hurt everyone he loved. Across the chamber, others fell. Soldiers lowered their weapons, looking confused. The hate drained out of the room, replaced by a devastating clarity. The enemy wasn't a monster. The enemy was a victim. Varric, watching from his ship, saw his army dissolving into a weeping, confused mob. "No!" Varric screamed. The hologram distorted. "Stop! I command you to fight! The signal is active. Fight!" He slammed his fist onto his console. In his panic, he hit the wrong switch. He overrode the stealth protocols of his own bridge. The hologram in the council chamber widened. The background of Varric's location came into focus. He wasn't on a warship. He was on a syndicate cruiser. And standing behind him, clearly visible, were officers in the black and red uniforms of the Ares Vanguard. The galaxy saw it live. They saw the independent counselor taking orders from a foreign military corporation. They saw the transaction. Varric froze. He looked at the camera. He realized the lattice was back online. He realized the truth was broadcasting. "Kill them!" Varric shrieked, pointing at the screen, pointing at the invisible millions watching him. "Fire the orbital cannons. Burn the station." He had exposed himself. He wasn't a politician saving the day. He was a traitor ordering a massacre, down in the core. Sarilith slumped forward in the seat. The light faded to a gentle, pulsing white. She was unconscious, breathing shallowly. Jace ran to her. He pulled her from the interface. "Sarilith? Sarilith." Her eyelids fluttered. She looked at him. "Did they wake up?" she whispered. "Yeah," Jace said, his voice thick with emotion. "Yeah. They woke up. You did it?" The station shook violently and sirens began to wail, but these weren't the internal alarms. These were proximity klaxons. Jace looked at the monitor. The space outside the station was filling with ships, dozens of them, sharp, angular destroyers painted in matte black and crimson. The Ares Vanguard had arrived. A voice, cold and synthesized, cut over the station's comms. "This is Admiral Krell of the Ares Stabilization Fleet. We have detected a total breakdown of local authority. We are initiating a humanitarian intervention. The weapon ports on the destroyers opened. Surrender the Regent Sarilith immediately," the voice commanded, "or we will stabilize this station by venting the atmosphere. You have 5 minutes." Jace looked at the screen, then at the unconscious woman in his arms. He looked at the open door of the core. "Here we go again," Jace whispered. The siege did not begin with a bang. It began with the metallic scream of magnetic clamps locking onto the station's outer hull. 50 Ares Vanguard destroyers, painted the matte black of a void without stars, had synchronized their docking sequence. They latched onto the council station like a swarm of predatory beetles attacking a grand glass flower. The impact shuddered through the station's frame, vibrating the coffee in cups on the executive level and knocking dust from the ventilation grates in the undercity. Inside the station, the illusion of civilization evaporated. The luminous corridors, usually filled with the polite hum of diplomacy, became rivers of panic. Civilians scattered like schools of frightened fish, their colorful robes and suits blurring as they trampled over discarded data slates and overturned luggage. The station's automated voice was trying to maintain order, but its soothing tones were drowned out by the harsh, rhythmic thud of cutting lasers burning through the airlock doors. In the seat core, Sarilith felt every vibration. She was plugged into the interface, her nervous system fused with the station's sensors. She did not just hear the breach, she felt it as a physical intrusion, a cold needle pricking her skin. "They are breaching the civic rings," Sarilith said. Her voice was tight, strained by the mental load of holding the station together. They are not waiting for a surrender. They are securing the infrastructure. Jace Rourke stood by the maintenance console, checking the internal schematics. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had been awake for 3 days fighting a war he wasn't qualified for, armed only with a hydro spanner and a refusal to die. They want the choke points, Jace said. Oxygen processing, gravity generation. If they take those, they can turn off the air until we suffocate. Saralith opened her eyes. The violet light in them was fierce. I will not let this station become a tomb, she said. She accessed the seat's deepest archives, the ancient protocols that predated the Council's corruption. There are transit gates, she said. Old ones, from when the station was a way station, not a capital. They lead to the outer trade routes. They are sealed, but I can open them. You want to evacuate? Jace asked. I want to save the people, Saralith said. The crown is heavy, Jace, but it is not worth a massacre. If I stay and fight a war of attrition, 10 million people die in the crossfire. She looked at the holographic map. I will open the south gate. It is the furthest from the breach. But the civilians are trapped in the central promenade. We need to create a path. Jace tightened the straps on his tool belt. He grabbed a heavy-duty plasma cutter and a bag of architectural charges he had liberated from the mining sector. You open the door, he said, grinning a sharp, dangerous grin. I will part the sea. Jace did not lead an army of soldiers. He led an army of the invisible. He had rallied them over the emergency frequency, the janitors, the pipe fitters, the waste disposal techs, and the ventilation scrubbers. The people who knew that the glossy walls of the council station were just panels covering a mess of wires and grease. They met in the maintenance junction below the central promenade. It was a motley crew armed with wrenches, welding torches, and industrial cleaning drones modified to spray high-pressure sealant. Listen up, Jace shouted over the sound of distant explosions. Those soldiers upstairs, they have military maps. They know the corridors, they know the elevators. He paused, looking at his team. But we know the guts. We know where the steam pipes run hot. We know which floor plates are loose. We know that if you reverse the polarity on the kinetic scrubbing field, it doesn't clean the floor. It turns the floor into a frictionless ice rink. A cheer went up from the techs. They are trying to cut off the civilians, Jace said. We are going to make their route very, very inconvenient. Unit, deploy the schematics. The drone hovered up, projecting a map of the promenade. Jace pointed to the main arterial hallway. Team 1, you are on gravity duty. When the Ares troops hit this junction, I want the gravity inverted. Make them fall on the ceiling. Team 2, steam vents. Cook them like lobsters. Team 3. He picked up a canister of industrial lubricant. Grease the ramp. Let's see how dignified a conqueror looks when he cannot stand up. While Jace turned the station's infrastructure into a slapstick nightmare for the invaders, Saralith fought the war of truth. She sat in the seat, the biometal tendrils humming against her spine. She could feel the Ares troops advancing, slowed but not stopped by Jace's guerrilla tactics. She could feel the terror of the civilians flooding toward the south gate, but the real battle was happening on the broadcast frequencies. Varric was still transmitting from the Syndicate cruiser, spinning a narrative of humanitarian intervention. He was claiming that Saralith had released a biological weapon, that the Syndicate was here to cure the station. Saralith reached out with her mind. She grabbed the truth lattice and pulled. She didn't just broadcast, she invaded. She forced a connection with Varric's ship, overriding his communications array with the sheer brute force of the seat's quantum authority. Varric's face appeared on the giant screens of the promenade, looming over the fleeing civilians and the advancing soldiers. "Varric!" Saralith's voice boomed, echoing from every speaker. Varric looked up, startled. He tried to cut the feed, but his controls were locked. "You call this a rescue?" Saralith said. Her avatar appeared on the screen, blazing with golden light. "You call this stabilization?" The lattice flared, bathing the promenade in the truth field. The soldiers paused, the light making their armor feel heavy. "Answer me, Varric," Saralith commanded. "Who paid you?" Varric sneered. He tried to lie. He tried to say, "The conscience of the galaxy," but the words died in his throat. The lattice seized his vocal cords. It bypassed his ego and went straight to the factual record stored in his brain. His mouth opened against his will. "The Ares Vanguard Directorate." Varric choked out. The galaxy watched. "How much?" Saralith pressed. "What is the price of a council seat?" 5 billion credits annually, Varric confessed, his face twisting with the effort to stop speaking. "Plus a 15% royalty on all orbital defense contracts signed by the new regime." The ugly machinery of peace was laid bare. It wasn't ideology. It was a subscription model. "And the quotas?" Saralith asked. "Tell them about the quotas." "We agreed to..." Varric gagged, fighting the compulsion. "We agreed to destabilize 3 border sectors a year, to drive up demand for their weapon systems. Peace is bad for business." A gasp went through the station. The soldiers of the Ares Vanguard looked at each other. They had been told they were peacekeeping. They were actually just sales representatives with rifles. "Cut the feed!" the Syndicate Admiral screamed on the bridge behind Varric. "Jam the signal!" The screen dissolved into static, in the seat core. Saralith gasped as the connection was severed. The lattice flickered and died. "They are jamming the master relay," Saralith said to the empty room. "They are blinding the galaxy." In the ventilation shaft above the promenade, Jace was crawling on his elbows, covered in dust. "Jace!" Saralith's voice crackled in his earpiece. "They killed the broadcast. I cannot hold the truth field without a signal carrier." "I see it," Jace said. He peered through a grate. Below, the screens had gone black. The Ares troops, no longer under the weight of the truth, were regrouping. They were raising their weapons. "We need a new relay," Jace said. "The main dish is compromised," Saralith said. "There is nothing else with enough range." Jace looked around. He saw the massive holographic billboards lining the promenade. They were hardwired into the station's commercial grid, independent of the council network. Currently, they were blacked out. "Wait," Jace said. "The ad network. It runs on a subspace frequency so advertisers can beam commercials directly to passing ships. It is powerful enough to reach half the sector. It is encrypted," the drone pointed out, floating beside him. "By corporate copyright algorithms." Jace pulled out his datapad. "Unit," he said. "Do you remember when I got bored last year and wrote a virus that replaces every image of Counselor Varrel with a dancing cat?" "I recall," the drone said. "It was immature." "Load it," Jace said. "But replace the cat with Saralith's feed, and replace the target with the entire billboard grid." Jace spliced his pad into the junction box. He worked frantically, sparks showering over his hands. Bypassing firewall, rerouting power from the slushy machine, and post! The billboards along the promenade flickered to life, but they didn't show ads for synth cola or vacation moons. They showed Varric's face. They showed the list of contracts. They showed the confessions looping on repeat, 10 stories high. And because Jace's virus was messy, the formatting was wrong. Varric's confession about treason was superimposed over a bright yellow background that read, "Clearance sale. Everything must go." Another screen showed the Syndicate Admiral shouting, "Jam it!" with a scrolling banner beneath him that said, "Try our new spicy cricket crunch." It was dark, absurd humor, but it worked. The truth was back, and it was unmissable. The Syndicate troops were losing patience. The truth hurt, but they had orders. "Breach the core," the Admiral commanded. "Kill the Regent." They blew the blast doors to the seat core sector. A squad of heavy troopers, armored like tanks, marched into the antechamber. Sarilith stood up from the seat. She was exhausted. The effort of the broadcast had drained her, but she wasn't done. She looked at the troopers. They raised their plasma cannons. Sarilith didn't raise a shield. She placed her hands on the floor. "You are in my house," she whispered. "And I am renovating." She pushed her will into the station's architectural protocols. The corridor in front of the troopers twisted. The floor plates unlocked and folded upward like origami. The gravity in that specific 10-foot square shifted 90 degrees. The troopers screamed as they fell sideways, slamming into the wall that was now the floor. Sarilith didn't stop. She turned the station into a labyrinth. She sealed doors and welded them shut with a thought. She opened maintenance hatches beneath the feet of advancing squads, dropping them into laundry chutes. She looped the corridors so that soldiers running toward the core found themselves running back out the way they came. She was protecting the civilians by turning the building itself into a shield, but she couldn't watch everywhere. Jace was in the lower junction, helping a group of refugees navigate the slippery ramp. "Go!" he shouted. "The south gate is open." A side door blew open. 3 Syndicate commandos burst in. They weren't slipping. They had magnetic boots. "There he is," one shouted. "The collaborator." Jace turned, raising his stun baton. He didn't stand a chance. A shock pulse hit him in the chest. His muscles seized. He dropped to the floor, convulsing. The commandos were on him instantly. A boot slammed into his ribs. They dragged him up, jamming a pistol under his chin. "Hold fire!" the leader shouted into his comms. "We have the human. Tell the Regent to surrender or her pet bleeds." Jace coughed, tasting copper. He looked at the commando. "I am not a pet," Jace wheezed. "Shut up," the commando growled. He keyed his mic to the general frequency. "Regent Sarilith, we have Jace Rourke. Surrender the seat, or we execute him live on the ad network." Silence fell over the station. The architectural shifting stopped. In the core, Sarilith froze. Her heart stopped beating for a second. The commando grinned beneath his helmet. He looked at Jace. "She is going to fold," he said. "You are her weakness." Jace looked into the helmet's visor. He was in pain. He was terrified. But he remembered the lesson. He remembered what Sarilith had told him about dignity. He spat blood onto the commando's visor. "She is not going to fold," Jace said, his voice raspy but clear. "Because she knows I would rather die than be a lever you use to break her." He looked up at the ceiling camera. "Do not stop! Sarilith!" Jace shouted. "Do not give them an inch. Dignity isn't granted, it is practiced." The commando raised his pistol. "Goodbye, mechanic." The wall behind the commandos exploded. It wasn't an explosion of fire. It was an explosion of matter. The Durasteel wall simply disintegrated, unraveled at the molecular level. Sarilith stepped through the hole. She wasn't glowing with the golden light of the lattice. She was burning with a white, cold fury. She wasn't wearing the crown. She was wearing the dust of the battle. She didn't use the seat to twist the room. She didn't use the lattice to make them confess. She raised her hand, and the gravity around the commandos intensified by a factor of 10. They collapsed. Their armor crumpled under its own weight. The pistol fell from the leader's hand, clattering to the floor. They were pinned, unable to move, unable to breathe. Sarilith walked over to Jace. She knelt down, ignoring the soldiers flattened around her. She touched his face. Her fingers were bare, trembling slightly. She wiped the blood from his lip. "You told me not to stop," she whispered. "I did," Jace groaned, leaning into her touch. "I was trying to be heroic. You ruined my big scene." "I am not a savior, Queen," Sarilith said softly, her eyes searching his. "I am just a person who refuses to abandon the one who chose me when I was nothing." The lights in the corridor flickered and died, leaving them illuminated only by the sparks from the severed cables and the drifting ash of the battle. Sarilith looked at him. The question was in her eyes. It was the same question she had asked in the elevator, in the shuttle, in the suite. But this time, she wasn't asking for permission to touch him for survival. She was asking for him. Jace didn't joke. He didn't deflect. "Yes," he whispered. Sarilith leaned in. She kissed him. It was a kiss that tasted of smoke and relief. It was fierce and messy and desperate. It was the heat of two stars colliding, not to destroy, but to form something new. There was no armor between them, no diplomatic immunity, no titles. Just the skin-to-skin contact of a man and a woman who had seen the end of the world and decided it wasn't allowed to happen today. It was unmistakably adult. It wasn't the fantasy of a fairy tale, it was the grounded, gritty reality of desire threaded with absolute trust. Jace pulled back, resting his forehead against hers. "Okay," he breathed. That was better than the big scene. "We are not done," Sarilith said, helping him stand. "The syndicate is still outside." Jace looked at the pinned commandos. "Not for long," he said. "Look at their comms." The commando's wrist unit was flashing. A retreat order. The broadcast had worked. The galaxy had seen the truth. The Ares vanguard, exposed as warmongers, were pulling back before the interstellar Concordat fleet arrived to investigate. Their humanitarian cover was blown. Staying meant war with the entire galaxy. "They are running," Jace said. Sarilith stood up, pulling Jace with her. "Then let's make sure they never come back." The aftermath was not a parade. It was a cleanup. The station was battered. Scars of carbon scoring marked the pristine walls. The air smelled of ozone. But the siege was broken. Sarilith convened the survivors in the council chamber. The platforms were still askew. The banners were torn. She stood on the dais. She didn't wear robes. She wore a simple gray flight suit she had borrowed from Jace. The camera drones hovered, broadcasting to a galaxy that was finally listening. "This council is dissolved," Sarilith announced. There were gasps from the traditionalists. "The structure we built was flawed." She continued. "We built a hierarchy based on blood and secrets. We built a machine that could be bought. That ends today." She gestured to the empty seats. "From this moment, the council is replaced by the assembly. It will not be ruled by a bloodline. It will be a rotating body of citizens and species, chosen by lottery and merit." She pointed to the seat behind her. "And the seat will remain. But it will not be a throne. It will be a witness. Every session, every vote, every credit spent will be audited by the truth lattice. If you lie to the people will know." She looked at the camera. "I will not rule this assembly. A ruler who cannot step down is a tyrant in waiting. I will serve only as the guardian of the seat. I will maintain the interface until the new system is stable. And then I will leave." She proved it then and there. She wasn't addicted to the power. She was merely the custodian of the truth. She stepped back from the podium. Jace was waiting for her in the wings. A delegation of ambassadors was trying to pin a medal on his chest, the Star of Valor. Jace was politely trying to dodge it. I really do not want a medal. Jace was saying, it will just poke holes in my coveralls. Can I just have a week off? He saw Sarilith. He broke away from the ambassadors and walked over to her. Guardian, huh? Jace said, grinning. Catchy title, better than Regent. It is honest, Sarilith said. She looked at him. The adrenaline was gone. Now there was just the quiet reality of what came next. You could go home, Jace, she said softly. You have immunity. You have fame. Earth would welcome you back as a hero. Jace looked at the medal in his hand. He tossed it onto a nearby table. Earth is nice, Jace said. It has great gravity, but the commute is terrible. He stepped closer to her. I am not staying for the medal, Sarilith, and I am not staying to be your pet or your ornament. He took her hand. I am staying because you need a partner, someone to tell you when your hat looks stupid, someone to remind you that even guardians need to eat lunch. Sarilith's eyes filled with tears. She squeezed his hand. I would like that, she whispered. They stood on the observation deck at the very top of the station. It was quiet here. The noise of the reconstruction was far below. The glass curved over their heads, revealing the vast, star-dusted spread of the galaxy. The syndicate ships were gone. The friendly lights of the relief fleet twinkled in the distance. Sarilith leaned against the railing. We did it, she said. We actually stole freedom back. No, Jace corrected, standing beside her. We didn't steal it. You can't steal freedom. You have to rebuild it. Brick by brick, accountability by accountability. He looked at her profile. And love isn't safety, is it? Jace asked. Sarilith turned to him. She thought about the bomb, the poison, the siege. No, she said. Safety is an illusion. Love is courage. It is the courage to stand next to someone when the walls are falling down and say, I am still here. It is courage practiced daily. Jace finished. He reached out. Sarilith took his hand. They stood there, hands clasped, fingers interlaced. Behind them, through the glass floor of the deck, the golden glow of the truth lattice hummed in the chamber below. It was steady now. It wasn't flickering. It was a constant, warm promise that pulsed through the station, ensuring that in the dark, cold vacuum of space, no one would ever be able to hide the truth again. Jace squeezed her hand. Sarilith squeezed back. They watched the stars turn, ready for the work to begin.